He was on the board of adjustment. Michael might not be on.
That's all right.
Okay. No.
All right, I want to wish everybody back from the holidays. Looks like we're gonna get a little nasty weather this weekend and maybe Monday, but glad everybody's back. If y'all would, let's stand and say please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank y'all. All right, so on approval of the agenda, I think we got a couple items we maybe want to add to the regular agenda. Is that right? Roger, you got something maybe on the food trucks?
Hang on just a minute.
Oh,
You want now, I'm sorry?
have you got something on the food trucks you'd like to add to the regular agenda?
Yes, Sandra does.
Sandra does, my bad.
I would.
Okay, so we'll make,
You would turn on your microphone? I would.
so we'll make that F
A discussion item?
as a discussion item. And I think Daniel had something, maybe a closed session.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. If it's the council's pleasure, we'd like to talk in closed session about property acquisition, please.
Right, so I'm okay with that. Everybody else okay? That's it? Okay. All right, so I need a motion on approving the agenda as we've made changes to.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Sandra, please, somebody second me?
I'll say.
All right. Okay, moving on, announcements. Anybody, got any announcements? Nope.
No, sir.
Anybody regular? Nope, no announcements. All right, moving on, public comment. Jerry, I see you're on here, but if you want to, we'll wait since we got it on the regular agenda and talk about it then. Mr. Foster, I see you're on there.
I'll make it short tonight. I just want to congratulate you, Counselor. What I got to say tonight, was already heard it. I just want to ask you to take into serious consideration. I know we have a couple $1 million that's going to be spent one way or the other. And I want to, I know you have already semi-approved some money for MERLAC. MERLAC is the Mills River Life Enrichment Center. Run out, it's a 501c3 charitable organization. It's been operating here for 13 years, doing a very good job. And that was one of the things that came up on the planning board, that people would like to see more stuff for the seniors. Well, it's already happening. I'd like to see, just, I know Ruth asked for something, I forgot what it was, maybe $10,000, I don't know, whatever. Build it. That's what I was asking for. And also, I don't know if you can do this or not, but I just, something else, we need two other things. In Mills River, we need to see if we could use some of that money to, on a public-private partnership, maybe to improve the cell service out here, and also to improve the internet service. The internet service is not at all in some areas, and so in others. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, moving on, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
I'll make that motion.
Roger, second.
I second.
Sandra, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to the regular agenda. A, public hearing on the text amendment. I guess Daniel will lead us in that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. This evening, you've got a public hearing scheduled to discuss text amendment 21-05, excuse me, which is in addition to the zoning code to implement conditional zoning, which is authorized by North Carolina General Statute 163. Before we go too much further, Mr. Mayor, I think we should get the public hearing officially open for the record.
All right, I need a motion to open a public hearing based on text amendment TXT 2105 for conditional zoning.
I'll make a motion that we enter a public hearing for text amendment TXT 2105.
I need a second. Roger? All in favor? Okay, we will move on with it. Now it's officially open.
For a further detailed explanation and the presentation, I'm going to hand it off to Mike Malachek, the zoning administrator. Michael, give me just one moment to get the presentation pulled up for the public.
So instead of reading from my staff report, we have a short PowerPoint for everyone tonight to summarize how we've gotten to where we are and provide a background on conditional zonings and what's being proposed. Perfect. So again, we're going to go through the process we've been through over the last 9 months, how we got to where we are, a little bit of background on conditional zoning, the reason for conditional zoning, the requirements and conditions that go with conditional zoning, and any next steps for approval. So this started all the way back at the end of May 2021, when council had an inquiry to staff about conditional zoning. We provided some background information, and then at the August council meeting, council formally directed staff to begin drafting a text amendment to add conditional zoning to the town zoning ordinance. We took that to the planning board at their October and November meeting. They considered it at both meetings, and then at their November meeting is when they formally acted on it, signed the statement of consistency and recommended approval. Council set this public hearing at the November meeting before the council changed, and here we are, January 13th, holding the public hearing. A little bit of background, zoning districts are broken into a couple different categories. We have conventional zoning districts, which are the light industrial, general business, MR30, low density residential. We have conditional districts, which is what is being proposed tonight. Form-based districts, which the town does not have, but involves basically controlling architectural standards of buildings, massing, form, usually used in downtown districts and corridors. We have overlay zoning districts, which the town does have. Our town corridor overlay district on some of the major thoroughfares through town does have architectural standards for new non-commercial buildings. And then charter zoning districts, which are zoning districts that are implemented when a city is first chartered or when the city basically is founded. So conditional zoning, I'll just read this quick thing from the statute. So property can only be placed in a conditional district in response to a petition from all owners to be in a conditional district. So this isn't something the planning board, council, or staff can initiate. It's only initiated by private property owners. And again, it's a zoning district that has proposed specific conditions, a site plan, etc. This is a specific example the town manager provided from his time in Brevard. They've had conditional zoning there for a while, where you can see basically a site development plan or a master plan on the left that's incorporated into the new zoning district. And then on the right, it's kind of small, but you have the actual table of permitted uses that might be allowed through a special use permit and other development standards. So our normal zoning districts have this all laid out in our zoning ordinance. This is basically developed specifically for a specific property with a specific use and plan in mind. So why do this? So minimize impacts, maximize development potential. And by minimize impacts, I mean development impacts, traffic, addressing development of unique sites, encouraging an innovative design, and basically development flexibility. Quick backstory, if you all know the Hills Machinery site on Old Haywood Road, there was a point in time we were approached with an economic development project for one of those buildings up there. But because of the inflexibility of our code, we weren't allowed, basically couldn't accommodate that. That's why this is being proposed tonight. What I guess, sorry, go ahead.
Give me an example of a unique site.
A site that may have, 3/4 of the land in the floodplain, where there's only a small portion of land that's developable, so they may need more density. Currently, like our multifamily only allows 4 units per acre. They may need more density to even make that site buildable. We have more flat land than a lot of other places, but topography, steep slopes can come into play. And also just land preservation. If we want land preserved, it's kind of a give and take. There may be situations where it would be warranted to have more density in one part of a property in exchange for preservation or something else on the other part. And then the bottom part I skipped over. This is not intended to skip over the variance process. If someone, wants to build a house, different from our setback requirements, vary from our height requirements, they have to go through the variance process. Now, those can be changed through conditional zoning, but again, it's meant to address much broader standards. You don't apply for a conditional zoning district so you can build a building 20 feet higher than what's allowed. So qualifications, you don't want this process to be open to every property in town. So one of the things we developed with the planning board over multiple meetings is how does a property qualify to even apply for this process? And what they came up with was having a lot size of 3 acres or larger and having a proposed building size, again, gross floor area, so this is all floors, of 50,000 square feet for a commercial building and 150,000 square feet for an industrial building. So those are the 3 standards or benchmarks in application. Not all of them, they would have to meet one of those in order to qualify for this process as proposed.
Question. So if a landowner wants to do something on point A, the town busts their chops. Okay? But if you want to do something on B, if we approve the conditional zoning, then it's up to the staff to say, oh, Roger, we love you, so this will work.
I don't understand the question.
You want, I'm sorry?
I don't understand the question.
Well, is that the town busts people's chops on our current ordinances.
When people don't comply, is that what you're saying? When people don't meet the code, you're saying we don't allow it currently.
That's right.
Got it, yeah.
So is that right now, the town staff says it either fits or it don't.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Yeah, or I direct them to seek a variance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with conditional zoning, the staff can say, oh, maybe you're right. Well, is that if the council approves rules, I expect the staff to follow those rules. But I expect them to do whatever they can do to fit the house or whatever in a particular parcel of property. That's not being done now. Now, so now you're asking for conditional zoning to which the staff can say, oh, Roger, we love you. James, we don't like you. Roger, yours will fit. James, yours won't. That's basically what this is. And I refer to page 4, line 40. Allows projects of innovative design and layout that would not otherwise be permitted. So who is giving the staff that authority?
This body. And again, this process was not initiated by staff, it was initiated by.
I
the
understand
council.
that,
So basically, again,
but it's subjectivity to the staff.
no, the private property owner applies and comes before, well, yeah, staff reviews the plans, and as always, we make a recommendation that, like any rezoning, it goes to the planning board, which makes a recommendation.
Okay, I
And then
understand all that.
the final say is this council, and it's a legislative decision, that's a majority vote, and it can be
All
up or
right,
down for any reason whatsoever.
so on line 40 of page 4.
Yep.
Okay, says the conditional zoning district classification allows projects of innovative design and layout that would not otherwise be permitted.
Correct, it's meant to
So
allow
is that-
flexibility.
So is that if this project is in this particular part of our ordinance, it's either for or it's against. Is that fair?
In its current
Current.
state, in its current state,
Okay.
it's a yay or nay, yeah.
I vote no on the conditional zoning.
I finished my presentation.
Yeah, we need to probably finish the presentation. But I will say that right there above it on 35, if you start up there and read down to 40, it kind of tells you that you've got to fit in all these characteristics before it gets to that part.
And it's a negotiating process, and that's part of the legwork staff will do before anything's even presented to the planning board of this board is we'll come up with what we deem are reasonable conditions based on current ordinance standards. So we don't just pull something out of a hat. That's why we proposed that there be a residential conditional district, so we can point to the current residential standards and try and apply them. And same for commercial and industrial. But again, it's all up to this council.
So what you're saying is that it's negotiable.
Oh, absolutely,
Is it?
It's
Who is
all-
it negotiable?
yes.
Is it who's negotiating at the table?
It begins with staff, then it goes to the planning board, and then it would be this council.
It's much like a special use permit.
Well,
It's just a little different on
Well-
smaller base.
is that we're going to hear from Jerry Frady after a while. And I have some concerns with conditional zoning. Is that either you meet our zoning ordinances or you don't. There's no discussion.
Let's move on. I want to hear the rest of this. We've spent a lot of time on this. Let's hear it and then we'll make a decision amongst the public.
We went through the qualifications, so again, 3 acres or greater, 50,000 square feet for commercial, 150,000 for industrial.
Now, can I stop you just a second? I heard you say residential a minute ago.
Mhm.
So I see the 50,000 for that, 150 for the industrial. So do we have numbers for residential coming up?
No,
Not yet.
it would just be the minimum lot size, but again, this is just a draft ordinance
I got you,
proposal.
okay.
So this
Okay.
council can amend this, change it, you know,
Okay.
direct me to do whatever.
I got you.
One more question.
Yeah.
On that. So you could not go below the already current standards. What is it? One house per 30,000 square feet.
Currently, you cannot. For single family,
This would allow that or not allow that?
it could. Because one of the, and what this slide goes through is the standards that could be varied, which is permitted uses, lot size is what you're referring to. You could, you know, someone could propose a smaller lot size, different density, building height, parking, landscaping, setbacks. I don't need to read through all of
It's up
them.
to the staff. to
Let's
negotiate.
try to hear through the whole PowerPoint process.
Okay.
And let's try to write down any questions we have and let's work through them after this when we hear the whole thing.
So those are items that can be varied. Things that cannot be varied are state mandated requirements like watershed, stormwater, erosion control, stream buffers, driveway permits, etc. So
What's the airport got to do with this?
the airport with stormwater ponds, they don't allow specific stormwater ponds to hold water more than 24 or 48 hours because it attracts basically foul that could cause a plain swim hazard. That's-
Well, is that, I think that Mike, whatever his name was, from the airport, is that I asked him directly, and you may have been in the room or not, is that they did not want us to rezone the property over on Miles Road. I asked him specifically, I said, are you going to dictate what goes on in the town of Mills River? And he said, absolutely not. So now, we got the airport sneaking back in.
that's in relation
Is
to
that-
stormwater
Is
requirements.
that they have no control over the town of Mills River.
Right.
Okay, so we need to scratch that off of your list.
So there's two options proposed for the process. One is where the applicant comes before the planning board and this council with a preliminary plan, one with a final plan. So with a preliminary plan, basically they come with, let's just say, half the design. They show approximate building locations and come to get their zoning approval. And then that gives them time to hire an engineer, figure out where the water lines exactly are, utilities, and do the fully engineered construction drawings. And just like we do with subdivision approvals, we're proposing 2 years for a preliminary plan approval, so they can then come back for final approval. The other option is they just come here with the full-blown plans, everything engineered to the T, and if and when council approves it, they're good to construct then and there. But those are two processes that are being proposed. I kind of walked through this already, but option one, again, application, staff review, like all rezonings, goes to the planning board first, then the council. If it's approved, they would have 2 years with the option for a 1-year extension. I pulled that straight out of the subdivision chapter. That's what we do for subdivision approvals. And then they come back with engineered construction drawings, and then that would be a staff review just to make sure they're abiding by what council approved. And then they would get their zoning permit. Number 2 is shorter, but again, for the applicant, it's more work at the front end. They apply with fully engineered drawings, staff reviews, still goes to the planning board, goes to council, and if it's approved, they get their zoning permit. Pretty much went through that. So here's an example of a preliminary plan that town manager provided from Brevard conditional zoning. Again, approximate locations, we call this a concept plan or a sketch plan. But again, there's not 10 sheets behind it with utility locations, et cetera, et cetera. Just a close up showing, approximate parking, landscaping approximately. And then option 2 with the fully engineered plan, and we've seen some of these before here, where you have everything calculated out to a T, and again, if approved, they would be ready for construction. So approval modifications, we have this in the subdivision chapter as well. If there's ever a minor modification of approval, again, this is if a project is approved through this process, that would be at staff discretion. It's, moving a building a couple of feet because there's a hill there. It's reducing parking spaces by a couple spaces for some reason. And again, with justification, I don't vary these standards lightly, and, basically the applicant would have to prove something. A major change would have to go through the whole process all over again, which basically means coming back to council. And then if for some reason the plan falls apart and they want to actually redo the whole conditional district, including, because again, it's not just the plan, it's permitted uses allowed with a special use permit, they would actually do a text amendment for that conditional district. Again, same process, coming back to the planning board and council. So again, just to summarize, it's a different type of rezoning. We have qualifications for different projects. If it's approved, it's a standalone ordinance. It's its own, it would be conditional district residential 2022 - whatever. It's a standalone approval. There's optional conditions. There's required conditions that the town can implement. I didn't say this earlier, but in state law, conditions have to be signed off on by both parties. So nothing's enforceable unless everyone signs off on it. And then again, there's the two options for the process. So that's the end of my PowerPoint. I'm happy to entertain questions.
I would assume that Sharon has looked this over. Or has she seen it yet?
She's not. No, sir, she's not seen it yet.
Okay, I mean, this feels somewhat like spot zoning in a way. Is it not?
It can be open to a spot zoning challenge, but that's why when staff brings rezonings before the planning board and council, there are certain reasonableness statements this council has to consider, which if a spot zoning challenge were ever submitted against the town would defend against that. So as long as you consider, it's like 4 or 5 reasonableness items, the size of the parcel, adjacent uses, etc., it can defend the town from a spot zoning challenge.
I noticed when I read through here, it refers to the 40-year comprehensive plan a lot. And I just know from previous subdivisions, you know, there was one 12 years ago, possibly. 3 of us council members at the time rejected it in one of those 5 questions that it had to fit. One of them, does this meet your comprehensive land plan? And that particular parcel through there was in a section that comprehensive land plan had 5-acre lot size. And they was wanting to do a special use permit for that. So we denied it. When it went, they challenged it in court and the judge overruled us and said we couldn't use that, even though it was in there. So I just noticed it's in there a lot, but I know I've been beat down on that same thing myself. So,
Are you just referring to it being a lot in the staff report of the?
no, just in the, even in the blue, in the
Okay.
updated blue writing, it refers to, you know, we're gonna do this as a guide more or less. And I understand that comprehensive land plan, we do use that as a guide, correct? And not really, it's not an ordinance, it's
You're
just a
not
guide.
tied to it. Like Councilman Snyder was saying about the Miles View Drive rezoning, that approved rezoning was against the land use plan.
Yeah.
And it just amends the plan to be compliant with what council's decision is.
He said it's just a guide,
Yes.
supposedly, but some people take it as gospel.
Yeah. For me personally, I would like to see Sharon read through this for sure before
And blessed.
I would be willing to sign off on it myself. I see where it's got some good uses, as, you know, and I could see where it could get a few arguments started here and there with some potential neighbors, maybe. I'm just trying to look out after the whole community in my position. Anybody else got anything?
Well, you brought up a good point about neighbors. So I think what got this started back in April, whenever it mentioned, was impacts on neighbors with big projects maybe moving in the south, maybe be detrimental to the property values. So I look at this in a way as it can mitigate some of the impact to the neighbors if a piece of property is developed. Like Michael said a minute ago, it's a negotiating tool. So if you have a project coming in and you want to lessen the impact on the neighbors, you might say, well, you can do this project if you'll do X, X, and X. Is that fair, Michael?
Exactly.
And then maybe we can get around some of the conflict that we might have.
They just stay with the same ordinances that we had.
That's how I see this. And another thing, I would like for us to read through this line by line, the whole thing. Is that possible, Daniel? Because I have some questions about some individuals.
Sure, that's why we're here.
of it. If we want to, if you think it might take too long, we can split this up and maybe do it in another, maybe continue it to another meeting or maybe the next one. But it might take a little time because I got some questions.
Yeah, sure. This is entirely up to the council.
It's up.
I think Mayor Gaunt's made a good point. We need to have the town's attorney look at it. So we can proceed with your comments now, or you can wait and we can get the attorney to look at it and then come back, because that might change things.
Would you want to take your individual questions, maybe like he had spotted 40,
Mhm.
and let's go through and so they can make some notes to share with Sharon?
I'll leave that to you.
Well, I mean, if you want to read it. we'll read
Yeah,
it.
why don't we go ahead
Okay, let's
and
read it.
I want to read
collect them, and then we can send those to the attorney as well.
Okay. And I'll just, whenever I do come to one of my questions I've got written down, we'll just talk about it. Okay.
Sounds great.
Michael, you wanna read
Oh,
it?
sorry, so we're.
I mean,
Story time, all right. Sorry. So again, this is a couple different excerpts of the zoning ordinance, so the new section would be 154.067 conditional zoning district. It is recognized that certain types of zoning districts would be inappropriate at particular locations in the absence of special conditions. And interrupt me whenever anyone has a question. Some land uses are of such a nature or scale that they have a significant impact on both the immediately surrounding area and on the entire community, which cannot be predetermined and controlled by general zoning district standards. There are also circumstances in which a general district designation allowing such a use by right would not be appropriate for a particular property, even though the use itself could, if properly planned, be appropriate for the property consistent with the objectives of the zoning ordinance and the Making Mills River 2040 comprehensive plan. Establishment of a conditional zoning district shall only be considered upon the request of all owners and or their representatives of the property to be included. The conditional zoning may not be initiated by council, the planning board, the board of adjustment, the manager, the zoning administrator, or other town staff. As authorized under North Carolina General Statute 160B 703, the following conditional districts are established, which require the submission of a master plan as a prerequisite to any development. A, the residential conditional zoning district. B, commercial conditional zoning district. C, industrial conditional zoning district. Each district is subject to applicable conditions of the approving authority. If the ordinance creating a conditional zoning district fails to provide specific standards, any development in the district shall comply with the applicable standards for the corresponding base district contained in this ordinance. These conditions,
Explain,
Yes.
just a second, the base district, so that would be what is in our ordinance currently, right?
yeah, so for like the residential conditional district, the corresponding conventional district would be MR30. For commercial, it would be a combination of neighborhood commercial, MRNC, and MRGB, general business, and then industrial, light industrial. Mixed use, the mixed use conventional district, is almost open zoning with very few standards, so that wouldn't be used. Mhm. Each district is subject, I wrote that. These conditional districts are not intended to relieve hardships that should be resolved by means of a variance. The conditional zoning district classification allows projects of innovative design and layout that would not otherwise be permitted under this ordinance because of the strict application of conventional zoning district standards or other general development standards. Conditional zoning encourages innovative land planning and design concepts by A, reducing or eliminating the inflexibility that sometimes results from strict application of zoning and development standards that were designed primarily for individual lots. B, allowing greater freedom in selecting the means to provide access, light, open space, and design amenities. C, allowing greater freedom in providing a mix of land uses in the same development, including a mix of housing types, lot sizes, densities, and non-residential uses in a conditional district.
Okay, right there.
Yep.
That one. So that would theoretically change could change the density and the lot sizes in a conditional zone.
Correct. Those are standards that could be varied.
And it could technically go even more dense and smaller lot sizes than what is currently in our code right now.
Correct.
And that's 4 units per acre and
Or
multiple.
for multiple.
This is one of the biggest places I had a problem.
Mhm.
I do not think that we should, under any circumstances, increase, even allow any opportunity to increase density or to make our lot sizes smaller in town. Over. I think we have to pick what we want the town Mills River to be. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that. But you could technically get into apartment complexes, very high density stuff if we start going down this road, as I read C here.
You're correct.
And I just do not think that that's a vision. That's certainly not a vision I want to see from Mills River.
And if it's council's pleasure, again, if it's your decision to eventually implement this, restrictions like that can be put in this. You could say you can vary or not vary density or lot sizes at all.
Okay. That was one of the glaring things to me. I've got a few more.
Continuing, so D, promoting quality urban design and an environmentally sensitive development by allowing development to take advantage of special site characteristics, locations, and land uses. E, encouraging quality urban design and environmentally sensitive development by allowing increases in base densities when such increases can be justified by superior design or the provision of additional amenities, public-private open space. In return for greater flexibility in site design requirements, conditional zoning districts are expected to deliver exceptionally quality community designs that preserve environmental resources, provide high quality open space amenities, incorporate creative design in the layout of buildings, open space and circulation, assure compatibility with surrounding land uses and neighborhood character, and provide greater efficiency in the layout and provision of roads, utilities, and infrastructure. In order to apply for a rezoning to a conditional district, proposed development projects and subject property must meet at least one of the following minimum requirements. Lot size minimum of 3 acres, proposed commercial building area of 50,000 square feet of gross floor area, and proposed industrial building area of 150,000 square feet gross floor area.
Michael, on that right there, so where are we gonna work in the residential portion of this? Does it fit in these same, it can't fit in these same numbers, so we need to, if we're even gonna look at it and we're gonna accept any kind of residential unconditional, then we need to figure out some numbers for that as well, do we not?
It'd be hard to apply, because again, with residential, if you're talking about single family detached homes, there's no, large building size number that we can just point out. And again, we've worked through a couple of different scenarios with the planning board, and this is just what they came to. But I mean, if that's something you'd like us to look into and develop, we're happy to do that.
But you did look into it in the planning, with the planning board portion of it, just couldn't figure out a good number, or it just didn't work?
For residential, one was not developed.
Okay.
The 3 acre minimum lot size would be the closest metric that we could come up with in terms of
Okay.
residential.
Which, when you get them down to 3 acres, it opens up a lot of territory.
That's right.
So we'll have to think about that too. Okay, sorry, move forward.
No, you're fine. So uses, each conditional zoning district ordinance shall specify allowable uses and associated approval processes as one of the following. Uses permitted by right, a use permitted by right must comply with the development standards mutually agreed to for the district. A use permitted with standards, the same as above, except the use has to comply with additional standards not required of other permitted uses, and then special use permit. So a use, again, that's approved as part of the conditional district that requires a major or minor special use permit from the town. Development standards. Certain development standards may not be altered by means of the conditional zoning district. These include watershed regulations, stormwater, water supply permitting, wastewater permitting, NCDOT driveway permitting, any other state or federal requirements, sediment and erosion control, stream and wetland disturbance permitting. Unless specifically stated in the approving ordinance, all developments must comply with existing standards for parking, landscaping, corridor overlay district architectural requirements, road construction standards, yards and setbacks, as identified in the most closely related conventional zoning district. Conditional zoning districts may allow, yeah,
I'm sorry. So get back to B there. With that. So
basically stating that if something different is not outlined in the conditional district approval, the standards for that base district rule.
okay,
So if we got a conditional zoning application and they had nothing in it about landscaping, and it was for a commercial building, I would basically look at our base commercial district, see what the landscaping requirements are and apply it directly to it.
so it would allow the property owner to just choose certain aspects of the development that he wanted in addition.
If they wanted to. And again, that's part of what's on the
But
negotiation.
then that could also come back to this body to say, well, we don't necessarily think that, but we'll go this route if you want to, right?
They
To
could.
negotiate.
Mhm.
Okay.
Conditional zoning districts may allow for modifications to any or all of the following: uses, lot size, density, building height, parking, landscaping, setbacks, open space, signage, number of principal uses or buildings. And that's the end of that new section, again, describing the new conditional zoning district. Moving forward, this is an excerpt from the amendment section of the zoning ordinance. Amendments being an amendment to the zoning map, like a rezoning or a text amendment. So basically what we did is there was one process for rezonings and we just renamed it conventional rezoning and then added in the new process for conditional rezonings.
Could I stop you just a second?
Yeah.
And we back up a page to 180 and can, I know it was in there before, I may have never seen it, and paid any attention, but down zone, can you explain that to me just a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, just reading through this real quick. The town cannot initiate the down zoning of someone else's private property. Down zoning being going from commercial to residential. So vastly decreasing the list of permitted uses or limiting what's allowed on that person's property.
Okay.
One quick correction to that, Mr. Mayor. The downzoning cannot occur without the consent of the owner. So if a neighbor wanted to downzone your property, for example, limiting it, changing it from industrial to residential, for example, that would be a downzoning. You'd have to agree to that. State law does allow for municipalities to downzone, even if the owners do not want it. So there's a little bit more flexibility there, but that's what downzoning is, changing it from more uses to fewer uses.
Okay.
So if you have some property that is considered industrial property. Let's take the Battle Farm Road property. So we, as owners, could not downsize that property, or downsize is not the right word. Let's say that we wanted commercial business or residential. And we still can't do that?
The town certainly can, sure.
You want, I'm sorry.
The town can certainly rezone property it owns.
So the rules apply over here, but they don't apply over here.
Downzoning can occur, a property owner can initiate it. If, for example, the Miles View one, I believe, was industrial and it went to residential at the request of the owner, if I'm not mistaken, because they were having trouble selling it zoned industrial. And then they wanted to downzone it to residential, which is council approved, because they wanted to be able to sell it as a residential property. So that was an example of downzoning initiated by a property owner. Now, the council has looked in the past at property, changing it from one district of a higher classification to a lower one, which was in opposition of what the property owners wanted. And ultimately, it was dropped. It didn't go any further than those conversations at council, but that is an example of the town initiating a downzoning.
So what would be considered a higher classification? Would light industry, residential, commercial business?
So generally,
Is that, what is,
on the spectrum of lower intensity to higher intensity, low density residential, like in our case, MR30 is the lowest classification, meaning it's the fewest allowable uses, and it's geared towards residential. From there, you go up to commercial, and I'm blending neighborhood commercial and general business into one idea of commercial, which would be the next highest classification. And then on the upper end of it, you would have industrial, where you can do the most, so to speak, with a property. So that's the spectrum of low classification to high classification.
So again, this is page 12, line 231, explaining the process for conditional rezoning. In order for a property owner to initiate a change to the official zoning map to create a conditional zoning district, an application accompanied by the application fee shall be submitted to the Mills River Town Hall at least 60 days prior to the date of the planning board meeting at which the application is to be considered for a recommendation. Required supplemental materials for the preliminary or final master plan include site master plan, name of development, timetable including all phases, list of proposed development conditions, location of flood hazard areas, buffer zones, watershed districts, wetlands or similar, and then requirements for preliminary master plans. The location of proposed buildings, parking and loading areas, streets, alleys, easements, lots, parks, or other open spaces, property lines and building setback lines with street dimensions and tentative lot dimensions. The traffic and circulation system demonstrating a safe and adequate on-site transportation system that addresses vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian circulation. The proposed limits of construction for all proposed development activity, including all required protected areas and open space. A landscaping plan, architectural plans, traffic impact analysis, stormwater management plan, watershed compliance plan, conceptual utilities plan, including water, wastewater, and other utilities. And again, that's all just for a preliminary master plan. For the final master plan, it's all of those requirements. And in addition, the boundary as determined by survey of the area to be subdivided with all bearings and distances shown in the location within the area or contiguous to it of any existing streets, railroad lines, water courses, easements, bridges, floodplains, or other significant features of the tract. Scale and feet denoted both graphically and numerically with north arrow and delineation declination. A sketch vicinity map at a scale no smaller than 1 inch equals 1,200 feet, showing the relationship between the proposed subdivision and surrounding area. Existing topography and finished grading with contours drawn at 2-foot intervals. This requirement may be waived for development smaller than 1 acre or where insufficient topographic changes warrant such information. The proposed names of the development and streets, the owner's name and address, signature of the owner or owner's duly authorized agent, the surveyor's name, the names of existing and proposed adjoining subdivisions or property owners, the names of the city, county, and state in which the development is located, the date of preparation of the plans, and the zoning classification of the tract, current zoning classification of the tract to be developed and of adjoining properties. Proposed lot lines, lot and block numbers, and exact dimensions. The future ownership, dedication, or reservation for public use to a governmental body, for owners to duly constituted homeowners association, for tenants remaining in subdividers' ownership of recreation and open space lands. So basically future ownership, talking about dedication to other bodies. A statement from the appropriate utility providers regarding the availability of adequate water and sewer capacity for the proposed development. The plans for utility layouts, including sanitary sewers, storm sewers, and water lines illustrating connections to existing systems. The location and size of all utility lines, easements, and rights of way. The location of proposed buildings, parking and loading areas, streets, alleys, lots, parks, or other open spaces. Reservations, i.e. school sites. Property lines and building setback lines with street dimensions, tentative lot dimensions, the location of any building restriction areas, i.e. flood hazard areas, watershed protection districts, or jurisdictional wetlands. Building setbacks are to be measured from the property line to the closest point of the structure, including gutters and roof overhangs. Buildings shown for the purpose of measuring setbacks must reflect these elements when applicable. In addition, site calculation shall include the total acreage of the tract, acreage in parks and other non-residential uses, total number and acreage of parcels, the total number of housing units, area of all mixed use and non-residential buildings, gross project density per acre, linear feet of streets, and the accurate locations and descriptions of all monuments, markers, and control points. The location and dimensions of all off-street parking and loading spaces and walkways, indicating the type of surfacing, size, angle of stalls, width of aisles, and a specific, something this way. Typical cross sections of proposed streets showing rights of way, pavement width, grades, and design engineering data for all corners and curves. The location of any existing or proposed demolition landfills in the site. Such sites shall not be used for building. A copy of the full soil erosion and sediment permit application, including forms, plans, and calculations to be submitted to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, Erosion Sediment Control Office, and a copy of the approval letter prior to site plan or preliminary plat approval. Final proposed elevations of all non-single family and duplex buildings proposed for construction as part of the site plan approval. Subsequent buildings within the development may be handled as separate site plans. Such elevations shall include all facades.
Michael, what you've been reading there for the last 3 pages, with all, so that just to do with the permit,
The submitted
the
materials.
submitted material.
Correct.
So that would have to be submitted at some point, even if we didn't have a conditional zone, right?
We took these standards from the subdivision ordinance and a couple other areas. Now with a rezoning, we don't require this. This would only be required with this conditional district zoning. Is that
So-
correct?
So you would not require a site plan or any of the other watershed?
Oh, for like a subdivision
For
development?
any of
Oh, no,
that.
we do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is, how much over and above are the conditions for the permit? More so than what we have on books right now?
Do you know those details, Daniel?
I don't know the specifics of it, but like Mike said, we copied and pasted from the existing subdivision standards, but we'd have to do an audit to look back and see. I know we tweaked a couple of things, but I just don't know.
So you don't-
exactly.
You don't really know how much you put in versus what's already in our books right now.
Right. The vast majority of it came from the existing subdivision standards. I just don't recall what we tweaked, if anything, to make it specific to conditional zoning. But we can figure that, we can get that.
Could you
answer for
do that?
Certainly.
Please.
Mhm.
Would all of these be, you had option 1 and option 2 for when they would apply. All of these are for option 1 and 2?
I'd have to go back a few pages, but I think the first 9
Yeah, the first 9
were required for the
Okay, and then
preliminary.
after that,
Okay. 2, you bring it all to the table to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is gonna put the property owner deep in money before he knows what he's got going on. If he's even got a chance at it.
But we had a project come up last year that was kind of a contentious point, right?
Yes, that was the multifamily project
Right.
last year. Mhm.
So where did that ever come out? Do you have to submit the entire plan first? before it's considered?
And that
Because
is,
there was some question.
yes, so that section of code, there's some conflicting language. The application was withdrawn, but to answer your question, yes, that material is required on the front end of the application so that it can be considered by the appropriate bodies, which would be planning board and ultimately town council, for certain special use permits.
So it's my feeling, and it's just me talking here, but I think there needs to be an option for the developer to, see if this project's gonna get approval
Mhm.
before he spends all the engineering money
Right.
to bring it. But even if we don't do the conditions on it, I think that's something we need to look at.
And that's why the first option is structured the way that it is.
Right.
Because that's something that you wouldn't have to hire the surveyors and the civil engineers and the architects to put together that preliminary plan. It's much more of a conceptual drawing. And so the way that this has been written is that you could go do that, you could draw up your plan. I mean, you'd have to hire professionals for a certain component of it, I'm sure, to make it look attractive, but you wouldn't have to invest in the surveying and calculating the depths of all the water and sewer lines, the pipe size, stormwater calculations, anything like that. And then if it's approved by council, then that developer has 2 years with the option for a third to make those investments in the actual project. But at that point, they know that they've been approved in concept. It's just a matter of meeting the specific construction details.
That was just it was very confusing in the ordinance book.
Yes.
When I was going through that last year, I'd like to at least do something about that, so there's no confusion going forward.
Yeah, we're working on that as well.
Moving on.
So the next section, excuse me, addresses conditions. So per North Carolina General Statute 160D 703B, specific development conditions may be proposed by the applicant and or the town of Mills River, but only those conditions approved by the town of Mills River and consented to by the applicant in writing may be incorporated into the conditional zoning district ordinance. Conditions and site-specific standards imposed in the conditional district shall be limited to those that address conformance of the development and use of the site to town of Mills River ordinances, existing development standards, the Making Mills River 2040 comprehensive plan, or any amendments thereto, or impacts reasonably expected to be generated by the proposed development or use of the subject property. Modification of final approval. Minor modifications of conditional district site development plans approved by the Mills River Town Council may be considered by the town manager or zoning administrator as long as the requested modification does not involve a change in permitted uses, change in density, change in roadway layout, or transportation access points, or significant changes in building locations or other site characteristics. Any other modification of the conditions and standards in the approved conditional district shall be considered a major modification and shall follow the same process for the original approval of the conditional district. If multiple parcels of land are subject to a conditional zoning, the owners of individual parcels may apply for modification of the condition so long as the modification would not result in the other properties failing to meet the terms of the conditions from the original district or failing to meet the conditions in the original approval. Any modifications approved apply only to those properties whose owners petition for the modification.
Can I stop right there now? So, multiple parcels of land subject to a conditional zoning. So my hope and thought behind this was to do this on a case-by-case basis, not multiple parcels of property. So is there any way that we could, if a developer or somebody wanted to combine multiple parcels, should that be a requirement that these parcels should be combined and we're looking at one project instead of multiple parcels of property?
I can almost tell you from a builder standpoint, he would want to know if he was going to be able to do this on the preliminary stage, possibly before he combined it. Therefore, he's probably, I might be speaking out of turn, but he's probably gonna need to get all the property owners on board and do individual applications? Or can he put in an application on their behalf with a signature?
It's at council's pleasure whether you would want to require that, but normally what I see is there's, a letter of intent to purchase or contract to purchase, with the caveat that this approval go through. So normally, if someone's looking at purchasing 5 parcels to do a special project or conditional zoning district, normally they wouldn't close on those and recombine the parcels until some type of zoning approval, even if it's just for the preliminary plan is granted.
Okay.
But again, it's up to
But
council.
So say it was approved and there was something fell through. So the other parcels outside of what the main parcel is looking at, they wouldn't at that point be, so it would all go together though, right? So it'd be like an envelope type thing like that.
I think, like you said, it would be on a case-by-case basis, but, although the language is a little bit convoluted, what this section tries to spell out is that if it fell through and if the purchase was never executed, based on this example we're talking about, if a couple of those parcel owners wanted to get out or change what applied to their property, they could, as long as it didn't affect the overall development. But if the development fell through in this example scenario, the point may be good.
So would there be any way to word this to where there might not be confusion later on?
But you're looking for specific parcel owners to be able to get out, basically, is that what you're?
Well, I would say if one fell out on a multi-parcel deal, we may have to scratch it and start all over with the remaining parcels and do new, because on something like this, the way they're gonna bring us their master plan, if 5 acres gets chopped off of it, it may just totally change the whole aspect of the setting around it.
And
It's
change the
not
density
really-
and everything else,
Yeah, it might be where a second exit and entrance would be. I just think it would be, that would, to me, would be a major change, not a minor. That sound?
No, you're correct, and if that were the case, it would be major and it would come back before council.
Okay.
But I'll rework that,
You
yeah.
can kind of, I've got confidence.
So continuing on, I think this is the last paragraph. So conditional district review process and approvals, preliminary master plans may be considered and approved prior to the final master plan approval. This allows the applicant an opportunity to present a request for conditional rezoning without fully engineered construction details and plans. Preliminary and final master plan approvals are valid for 2 years, and the approval shall be annotated on the plan itself and certified by the zoning administrator or designee. The Mills River Town Council may, for just cause, grant a single extension of the master plan approval for a maximum of 1 additional year. And that's the end of the ordinance.
And would the 2-year period be to start the project or to be finished? the project?
To start, I guess it depends. If it's a preliminary master plan, they would have 2 years to come back with the fully engineered drawings. If they come through the option 2 before this council with everything fully engineered, it would be 2 years to start. Both scenarios having the optional 1-year extension, again, only granted by this council.
And basically, that just gives them time to get funding, get all their permit and get ready to roll. So that'd be a 2-year start date with a possible 1-year extension on the start date. But some of this could take longer than 2 years to even construct at your point of start. Thank you so much for reading this. All right, council discussion on this matter. Do we want to, Shannon Gons wants to at least minimal, see the attorney read through it, make sure she has no issues with any of it. Would I have a motion to table this to so after our attorney sees it, or how do I want to word this?
Recess.
I would, you would recess it,
Okay.
but first I would suggest calling for any public comment,
Gotcha.
just in case someone has come here for that.
Okay.
And then you recess it to a specific date and time. And then I would recommend maybe you reopen it for public comment that night as well.
Okay, at this point, do we have anybody that would like to make public comment on this text amendment change?
Conditional zoning.
Conditional zoning. No one? We got one. If you would, give us your name, please.
I will. Mr. Mayor, I'm Wyatt Stevens. I'm a lawyer from Nashville. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I do a fair amount of development work around Western North Carolina, and I have observed the migration from the traditional conditional use permit process to more conditional zoning. And it has mostly been a good development for both property owners, developers, and for the municipalities where they do it. We'll give you an example of that. So as it currently stands in the town of Mills River, if you have a piece of property, maybe a large piece of property, and it is zoned, let's just say MR 30, and you have a vision for it that would not exactly fit with the MR 30 district, which contains a lot of great criteria and requirements that that a prior town council decided this is what we want for this district in the abstract sense. But if a developer said, yeah, but I want to build something different, he doesn't have a lot of flexibility. He would have to come before this council and amend the zoning ordinance, which is rarely a good thing. Or he would have to take his chances with the Board of Adjustment, where he has to come in and prove that he meets each and every requirement of the ordinance in order to get approved. And if he doesn't get approved, then he can't build the project, even though it may well be a project that all of us would agree would be great for the town of Mills River. In a conditional zoning situation, it's like you condense it down into one step. It is both flexible, but it is also accountable, because this town council has the final say. And if they're hearing from enough voters and members of the community that this is not something that you want, you say, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to let you do that on this property.
But now, as an attorney, how would the appeal process go if we turn it down? There will be an appeal process, correct?
It's a great
Because there'll be a
question.
set of facts of findings or something.
It's a great question, Mayor, because, and it actually limits the appeal process, which is why a lot of my developer clients don't like it, because it's a legislative decision by this town council. And you can go to court, and if there is some, really extreme decision or basis upon which this town council said no, then that would be a legitimate ground to challenge it. If you tried to require as a condition something that you really couldn't do, and the developer or property owner was unwilling, maybe you could challenge it on that basis, but not the traditional grounds that you see, which is, the classic challenge to a decision of a town on a zoning application is you didn't follow your ordinance. I submitted an application where I met each and every one of these criteria, and you said no, and you can't do that, and you go get a Superior Court judge to reverse it. So that makes it a little scary, particularly for developers and property owners who come before and are subject to the politics of a decision like that. But the advantage is there's a lot more dialogue with the decision makers, with the staff, so that hopefully at the end of that process, everyone who is deciding it knows exactly what they're deciding, and they are making the decision that evening, whether it is in the best interest of the town of Mills River, whether it is consistent in general terms with the land use plan or not. If it's not, you shouldn't approve it. Not that it has to meet every element, because as you saw in that example you gave, that is not your ordinance. It's just a plan. But it's a result of community discussions where people come together and say, this is our vision for this community. And so it gives you flexibility to hopefully approve a plan that maybe would not have fit exactly in the ordinance that you had before, but is still what we all would agree we would need for this community. If that makes any sense. You're absolutely right to have Ms. Alexander review it. She's an excellent attorney, and she will have knowledge and expertise even greater than I have to bring to bear on this. And you're absolutely right, Councilman Austin, to look at every word and every provision and make sure that it's right, because there can be unintended consequences when it's not. But I would urge you to give it serious consideration. I think you will find you will end up having to make a lot more decisions about development. That can be good or bad. Those decisions can become political. But on balance, I think you will find better projects, more thoughtful, and the end result will be what you want. So I would ask that you consider it.
I got one more question.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna ask Ms. Alexander the same thing, but in your professional opinion, with this board changing hands, possibly every 4 years, every 2 years, you're gonna set precedents when you let something go through. Well, then we get a change of 3 and 4 years, we get a different majority, let's say, then they come in and don't allow something that was very, very similar. So still not going to be
A legal
a
challenge.
legal challenge, could be.
I mean, there could be, but just as with every rezoning decision you make, that's a legislative decision.
Okay.
If you decide to alter your zoning code, either a little bit or a lot, that's a legislative decision. And there are bases you can challenge that in court, but they're much more limited.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will say that in living in Mills River, we have a lot of our land that's tied up in the watershed, which restricts a lot of stuff as far as the building structure, the ground cover, all that. So it's going to police it somewhat, and it's not to be hindered with this. But would somebody make the motion to recess this and decide that, we could together decide a date we want to bring it back to? I don't know Ms. Alexander's schedule by no means, but I would say that she'll never get this back to us by the next meeting.
I agree.
I mean, no.
First meeting in February.
I think that's more reasonable.
You think that's
Schedule.
doable?
February 10th.
Okay, February 10th, that's 7:15.
6:30.
So that's right, 6, we want to do 6:30 or 6:40? Do we need a specific time? We got to get through our first.
I would usually ask you just go ahead and make it 6:30.
Okay,
If somebody comes for the hearing and you don't get to it till 7, it's better than if you
gotcha.
set it later and
Have
they
it
miss-
later.
you don't want them to miss it.
Okay, so we'll set it for 6:30, February the 10th. All in favor, need a first and a second.
I'll second.
Okay, Sandra's gonna make that motion if you got it wrote down. Roger second. All in favor? It shall be recessed. Okay. Now we need to schedule a public hearing for text amendment TXT 2109, public notice.
Mr. Mayor, this is a request that was initiated at the planning board to add additional notice to neighbors of major subdivisions. I'm going to let Mike talk a little bit about the history of this, just briefly.
So this came out of some discussions with neighbors of the Mills River Crossing subdivision, that there were some changes to the plans made, basically without them knowing about it, that were approved by the planning board. A couple council members and our planning board chair and the town manager and myself met with some of those constituents and heard them, and after some further discussions with the planning board chair and planning board members, basically the planning board initiated at their November meeting, directed me to add to the ordinance a text amendment to add public notice requirements for any new major residential subdivision. They considered that, I drafted it, they looked at the text at their December 7th meeting and recommended approval. So again, the next step is to set a public hearing. We proposed February 10th for this.
So these public notices will be for the subdivisions that already fit in our, say, MR 30 or whatever, that's already, there's no special use permits,
Yeah,
they fit. We allow it, they move forward, and so we're gonna be able to let the public around them know, the community members, know that this is coming.
exactly. So most of these residential subdivisions are allowed by right. The planning board basically has an advisory role where after the staff review, they make sure all the town requirements are met. And then they issue the final approval. This would only add mailed public notice to adjacent properties. We basically took what we do for all our other notice requirements, and it would be a sign on site. It would not be legal notice in a newspaper, because again, we reserve that specifically for public hearings, quasi judicial hearings of the Board of Adjustment, et cetera.
So is that? So I'm going to use Cook Lane as an example. And maybe you can help me on this one. But is that the biggest gripe that I heard from Laurelwood is that the town sent out notices to the existing property owners 10 days. Well, so what frosted them was that they had to, so after it goes through the mail, which could take 40 days and 40 nights, is that they may have 1 day to get their expert or their attorney to show up at the meeting. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, in terms of a quasi judicial hearing like that, the notice requirement is that it goes out no less than 10 days before the meeting, but no more than 25.
So what is the state's, what does the state statute say about mailing notices, regardless what it's about, to adjoining property owners?
We have to notify adjoining property owners for rezoning, for example, but that is that's being presented a quasi judicial setting like a special use permit. What else am I missing, Sue, that we have to advertise public hearings?
Variance,
Variance,
rezoning.
yeah. So those are
things
the,
like that.
yeah. And then there are a couple of other things that we will advertise public hearings for, but don't necessarily require notice, such as the budget adoption. That's a public hearing, but we don't notify individual property owners, but we advertise it. So the state requirement is that all decisions that require public notice, the mailing has to be sent out no less than 10 days before the meeting, but not more than 25. So there's a 2-week window there that you've got to get everything out. And in Cook Lane's example, getting it 10 days before, or sending it out 10 days before the meeting certainly was not advantageous to the neighbors. This particular request of the planning board is solely deals with major subdivisions that require planning board approval. And is that enough, Roger?
Well, no, is that the point that I'm getting is that if there was something going on next to me
Mm-hmm.
that required something for the town to notify Roger.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I would theoretically get a letter within 10 days,
Mm-hmm.
theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why can't we push that out? So if the statute says 10 to 25 days,
Mm-hmm.
why can't we push that out let's say 24 days,
Mhm.
then that gives Roger more of an opportunity to get his ducks in a row. And this is my point. Some of y'all know Gail, but so 3 or 4 months ago, we got a new power bill. Just a regular household bill. Well, so when Gail opened it up, it was already 20 days after it had been printed. So she had roughly a week to pay it.
Mhm.
So the mail is not what it used to be. Now, so I'd like to extend that to the 23, 24 day mark to send out notices. And then, after all that's said and done, we've done our notices and so forth, then the planning board, board of adjustments, whoever it is, council sets its public hearing. That's what's called customer service. I think setting a public hearing takes 25 days.
But Roger,
It's the exact notice that,
yeah, we're letting them know exactly when that public hearing is going to be. They're going to get 25 to 10 day notice of the public hearing. And then there will also be, as I understand it, that one sign posted on property for a secondary chance for them to see it.
All right, so let's try to think of our residents. Let's give them a benefit of the doubt and say, okay, let's do 20 days, whatever it is. But right now, we're scheduling a public hearing, and chances are the notices haven't even been sent out.
And I remember back in the day, Sue was always real good. You know, 25 days is the maximum number. And sometimes that would fall on a Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
So Sue would get it out Monday, Tuesday at latest. She'd give them as long as she possibly could to get them out. She always did before.
But that's not the way it is now.
Well, I can't verify that, but I know Sue pretty good.
actually what's proposed would not require a public hearing and is already noticed over and above what any statute requires. What is being proposed here tonight.
Exactly. But I agree with you, Roger. They do need to know. And this is initiated, and I sat in on some of those meetings once the votes was counted, and I knew I was going to fill that seat. It was more over, would I be correct in saying minimal changes to subdivisions that they knew was coming, but they felt like it was
Detrimental to their
adjacent
Yeah,
property by the
yeah.
way things got moved around on property. Is that
I'm
a fair
just-
statement?
Correct.
I'm just trying to look out for the citizen that has no control of what goes on here.
Oh, and I agree, but what's gonna happen is they're still gonna come and hear these at these public hearings. They're gonna hear about these subdivisions. They will still be those minimal changes that they'll run into. You know, they'll find that there's been stumps buried here and they have to move something off site. And it's gonna create a change. Then they're gonna come back and say, you know, I sat through that. That's not where that playground was supposed to be, or, you know, so we're still gonna hear it. But it will give an opportunity to know upfront what's coming and what to be expected.
Is this just going to be for property owners that have joined said project?
Correct. The planning board had talked about extending it further, like 500 feet. We advised against that because we didn't want to create the appearance that major residential subdivisions would be noticed any more than any other development approval. That could always be changed down the line but I think it should be done across the board for everything.
And as the town of Mills River's always been real courteous about if someone comes to the public hearing, we hear their case, even if they live on the other side of them.
Right.
Yeah. So, are we good with setting that hearing for February the 10th? Everybody good with that? Would somebody make that motion? And do we need to make a slight time change or keep them at 6:30 now?
We just keep them at 6:30
Okay.
now.
Is that, Shannon, I'll make that motion.
Roger made the motion. I need a second.
One second.
James second. All in favor? Okay. Committee vacancies.
Mr. Mayor, as you are aware, the council has several boards and committees that advise staff and the planning board and council on decisions. And as is usual, sometimes people resign, sometimes terms run out. So last Friday, I believe, Sue sent out all the existing applications we have for vacancies on both the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Advisory Committee as well as the Agriculture Advisory Committee. So this information is provided for you. We'll happy to answer any questions.
I know some council members may possibly have some possible appointments they would like to nominate.
Shannon, is that, can we switch to the agriculture right quick?
Sure.
Is that, I'd like to nominate Jeff Young for the open position on the Agriculture Advisory Committee.
So Roger's nominating him for the Agriculture Advisory Committee. Do we have a second?
And that's for a 2-year term beginning tonight. Okay, I need details.
So I've got Roger with it and James with a second. Is that okay, Sandra? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay, going back up to Parks, Trails, and Recreation Advisory. Does anybody have anything for that one? If they know these people, I looked through them. I didn't recognize any of them.
Shannon,
Yes.
is that, I'd like to see, is that I'd like to keep this open
Uh-huh.
to see if we get some more other applicants in.
Okay,
We have one of that considered audience tonight.
We do?
Speak.
would you like to get up and tell us who you are? Let us know some background. It might help make a decision.
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
Sure,
You give me your name, please?
sure. Nice to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Laura Moore. I've been a Mills River resident for 25 years. My first job, actually, when I was in high school at East Henderson, was at Jackson Park. So I love Parks and Rec. I started there as a high schooler and have followed lots of sporting events throughout my years, and would love the opportunity to be on the Parks Rec Trail Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions for Ms. Moore before she steps down? Anybody? I'm good. You good? Everybody good? Ms. Moore, I would assume that you're Jeff's wife?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. So at this point, does anybody, we just want to wait and see if we get any more? How many openings do we have on that one?
We have one opening on that board
Uh-huh.
and 5 applications currently, though a couple of your applicants are already serving on other boards. They submitted multiple applications when they did.
Okay. And some of those is probably a year or two old, I would imagine, right?
All your applications stay on file for 2 years.
Yep.
After 2 years, they're shredded.
Okay, thank you. So we're moving on with the committee at this point, okay? Moving on. So then we go to D, Agriculture Advisory, Trails, Park Trails, Committee Recommendations, Mills River Farmers Market.
So, Mr. Mayor, over the last several months, really the last year or so, staff and Agriculture Advisory Committee, the Parks, Trails, Recreation Advisory Committee has been talking with the folks at Mills River Farm Market about the potential for a permanent location. And we tossed around some ideas, and the location that was identified in the Parks Recreation Master Plan is the property over on Banner Farm Road. And so I'm going to let the chairman of both boards speak if that's the board's pleasure to let them discuss their letters. I just want to give that brief introduction, and
Give me a
I'll hand it back to
name,
you.
Good evening. My name is Bert Lentz. I serve as the chairman of the Agriculture Advisory Committee. We have discussed this as the town manager already stated. The concern about the future in the way of the farmers market, we need to do something more permanent and looking at town property to basically become that location and involve town staff in managing. Right now, that's done by volunteers. Much appreciated, but it's a heavy load and really look for the town to get the benefit also of the farmers market. The Ag Committee is 100% behind it, as we've stated in our letter. So we're asking for your support and move that one ahead as soon as possible.
I would like to say that back in the day, when we was still in the little place, me and Mr. Reed envisioned a covered truck shed.
Several of us did.
Several of us, yes, exactly.
Okay.
You're exactly right. Everybody on the board at the time, we considered it. We didn't have the funding available or the place to put it because we was there. I still see that vision. But I would wish we could figure out a way to get it here. Be able to use part of this parking that we've already got, because parking's expensive. And then then the farmers could take advantage. And as you know, me and you've not had this discussion. This is coming straight from my heart. The community, as they're here doing their park thing, as they get ready to exit, they could pick them up some fresh vegetables, groceries, and it would be a win-win for everybody. But I know now that I see the vision that's coming here, is it going to be too crowded?
I share the concern. We discussed that, and we still came to an agreement that we follow the Parks and Recreation Plan and use the other property to develop that, and also working out the potential for sharing parking space with Mills River.
Okay.
Bert, let me ask you a question. Is that, me and Shannon's been down this road many times. I agree with Shannon. I agree with you. What about is that I agree that I would love to have some type of closures, some type of permanent building, something here on our property. Now, is that, what about putting it right in front of the dog park? Well, is that the reason I ask? Is that you've got a whole lot more exposure than you do on Banner Farm Road.
What I would like to say from the Ag Advisory Committee, we're looking to town council to support integrating the farmers market, Mills River Farmers Market, into the town property. We said the Banner Farm property because that fits in your plan for Parks and Recreation. The goal is to make sure that the farmers market gets support
Right.
and has a permanent property.
Right.
The rest, we leave that basically up to you, as long as we are sure that you know the Ag Advisory Committee really would like to see your support and as soon as possible.
Is that having done this for 20 years, whether good or bad, is that I think that the council, Wayne sitting back there, is that we have always been supportive of the farmer's market. I am today, last week, and next week. And so now you've got, what, 4 people that's semi-ag related on the council. I would assume, James, we'll put you on the spot, is that I think that we are supportive. I just don't know where the best place to put it to keep the farmer's market from going from G and B to Mills River School. And they've done a good job, excellent job. I just don't know where to put them to get them the maximum exposure that we can to make them successful. Now, I'm all for supporting them. Is that if it takes $10 or 10,000, I'm there.
Well, I think the sport, let me leave the location alone. That's really a decision you got to make, and you have staff that can basically explain you why they would go one way or another way. I think the support is important, that there is a permanent location,
Right.
be it a shed, bathrooms, facilities that come with it, and part-time support in staff. That's all we're asking for, and the real details we leave up to staff and council.
Did the ag committee discuss the possibility of having this facility to where it can be used daily?
No, we did not specifically discuss that.
But I know it's targeted toward the tailgate market. But as a farmer, stuff is harvested daily in season, and it don't have necessarily a week's lifespan on it. So I would like to see a place that they could get rid of their stuff as fresh as possible.
I think there's a lot of potential for developing that further. I think right now, the question is, can we get this integrated into property of the town? And then how that can develop, can you do it just on Saturday, or can you develop it into a weekly market? So nothing.
Daniel, is this something that we can put on the visioning?
We can. One of the things that we were going to discuss this evening is potential options for funding if council was in a position to think about that now. There is a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant that's available each year. With the recent adoption of the state budget, the funding for that has greatly increased. Doesn't mean that the awards get bigger. It just means that more people will be eligible for those awards. That application is due in May. So we don't need anything at this point as far as investment goes to put that application together. We have funding in the budget already to hire the consultant to do that work. So there's the part F grant itself, which is a 50-50 match. We have unassigned fund balance that could be used either for the match or to do it outright if we wanted to move quicker. And then as of last Thursday, the U.S. Treasury Department has issued the final rule for the rescue plan funding. And all directions point to we could use that funding for something like this as well. There was some pretty dramatic changes for the better in that rule. So we can certainly talk about it in March if you'd like. We can talk about it further tonight. It's entirely up to the board. The only thing I'll caution is if we wait till March, we're gonna have to forego the Part F grant, but we can look at other funding sources.
Do we have staff to write the grant, or do we outsource that?
We would outsource that.
Okay. James, how many minutes on that?
No.
No. I would like to, I know you probably don't know the numbers, but I think the council will need to know how many active sellers they have at the market, so we can generate some kind of idea of how big this thing needs to be. You might know that.
Don't we have that information?
I don't know off the top of my head, Nicole. do you
Yeah, I
happen
don't
to
know off
that?
the top of my head either, but all that was considered, the Britons took a very large part in the role of the park master plan for that property. And so they have had the input in the initial design. They have also, just as to why the Banner Farm property, they have specifically said they do not want to be on Mills River Park property and would like to specifically be on the Banner Farm property. That is the preference of the Mills River Farmer Department and their board. So that's why when we created the park master plan, that the farmer's market was included in that piece of property and not in the master plan property for this piece of property.
Daniel, is that one of the other things that I started for the visioning
Mhm.
is that maybe Sue can do this, is dig up the original rules. I think it was something like, it had to be within 50 miles or something of Mills River.
I don't have access to the
We
information.
can, we can get you that information though.
Okay, is that the other thing? From what I understand, there's people selling women cosmetics out of the farmer's market. Whatever it was, it doesn't matter, but that has nothing to do with the farmer's market.
And if we absorb it and take it in under our own staff and umbrella, then we could change and manipulate the rules and either broaden them or narrow them up. Daniel, do you know, Roger may know, as far as the sewer over there, I know we did the extension right when I was the end of my last term,
Mhm.
but we have access to the sewer there now.
That's right. Mhm.
Okay.
I'll add, because I was on the ag board for this last meeting. I don't think, and you correct me or stop me, I don't think we're getting a little bit sidetracked on what the ag board's vision is. This is overall, and for lack of better terms, not to wear out the Britons. You know, they expressed this is a lot of work for a volunteer. So I think from the ag board's perspective, it's less about the details and more about continuing it. And the Britons need help. So we need to,
I understand.
is that?
Having farmed that property over next to Mills River Brewery at 2 acres for years and years, is that it's nothing but water there.
But there is gonna be,
And,
design issues there, for sure.
and that's what I'm afraid of, is that even if you put some type of building in there, which would be the ideal place, but even if you put some type of building in there, is that I'm afraid the floor is going to fill up with water.
But we'll cross that when we get
Right.
there. Sandra, I know you have something.
Thank you for coming and bringing that to us. And the incident, I think, where they had somebody selling makeup products at the farmer's market was not during the regular farmer's market. It was at a craft fair they had at the end of the season. And they had other merchants there too to help attract people. It was for during the Christmas seasons, but they're not normally there during the agricultural things. I was over there all summer and they abided by the rules.
Thank you very much.
Daniel, can you speak to you spoke about the grant thing in the state.
Mhm.
But is there, and Nicole may be able to answer this more than you then, is there a design or a dollar amount that we could attach instead of going into this blindly, which I don't want to do? We need to get some sort of idea about what we're talking about, what kind of structure we're on that, and how much it's going to cost.
And that's a big part of, well, that's one of the primary functions that consultant would do as part of the grant
So
application.
you're saying we're gonna have to spend money on a consultant to find out what we're gonna spend down the road?
Just like we would for any other project. we
Yeah,
do.
it'll be consultant, architect, design
Mhm.
to create a build number.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't have to go to the level of having architects and engineer designs to be able to apply for a PARTAC grant. But what we need to do, we already did our park master plan, but because I'm assuming you don't want to spend what was, I think, estimated at $3 million to do the entire plan at once, we need to look at a phase plan, just like we did at this part, just like we did for this facility. So to apply for what we would call phase one on Manor Farm property, we need to, again, look at those things. So what does the farmer's market need? And again, we have to remember this is a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, not a farmer's market grant. So we have to make sure certain recreational amenities are also included to make it a competitive grant. So we have to look at the needs of the farmer's market. We have to look at our master plan, and all that has to go through the same approval process as the original master plan for a phase plan. So it'll have to go to our Parks Committee. It'll have to go to the Farmer's Market Board. It'll go back to our Ag Advisory Committee. It will come to you all. There's a whole lot of stuff that needs to be involved to be able to meet the qualifications required for the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant. So again, it's not a huge amount of money to get this. We're not asking you to commit money right now. We will not do that until we're ready to submit the grant, so we would come back to you in probably April that had, this is what we want to accomplish. And this is how much, so if there's a maximum of a $500,000 cap for the grant. So say if we want to do that $500,000 and we want to match $500,000, so you're talking, $1 million for that project. So phase one, we would come back to you, if this is what we're going to do with this, that is what we would put in the application. And that's what you all would have to approve. And then going forward, we would do additional phases. We could do it like this part where we piecemeal it together. Okay, well, next we want to do the trails, next we want to do however we want to do it. But to get the grant done, we would have to do a phase one plan.
And keep in mind, if we do it over there and we're trying to do it with a parks grant, we'll have to encompass some park amenities over there at best if we're going to try to do anything with the farmer's market involved with that grant.
So if you go to the grant process and at what point are we committed to doing the project?
That would be, if we were to apply this year, the applications are due by May 2nd. So the proposal for our timeline would be, I think, at the April 14th meeting. So we would bring to you the plan of what we are planning to do. And that's where you would say, we would put the application together and you would say, yes, Nicole, please send this in and submit it. And that's when you would have to allocate those funds that you're committing to it. Because once you commit to it and they award you the grant, and then you say, just kidding, you're never going to get a grant again. So you really want to make sure at that April 14th date, we can stop up till that point. At that April 14th date, if you're not comfortable with the plan, if you're not comfortable allocating that money.
Rather than us hiring a consultant.
Yes, the thing is that's also not wasted. So if we decide it's not okay for this year, if we spend that money and we decide a year from now, 2 years from now, as long as we don't let it go for 5 or 10 years, that work's not going to go to waste. If you, on April 14th, you say, we're just not ready for this right now. Let's wait till next year's cycle to apply.
Do you have a guesstimate as to what that consultant to write the grant?
It's $5,000.
I just get a little heartburn about paying another consultant another $5,000 after we paid for the parks plan just last year.
Mhm.
So that's all.
Any more discussion on this matter? If not, we're going to move on and know we're going to follow up with it. So do you need,
So can we put this on the agenda for the visioning? Scott, is that okay?
Can I just say, I just want to make it clear though, if a decision is not made this evening, we will not be able to make the grant application. So not that you can't discuss the farmer's market at a later date, but if we do not decide to apply for the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant this evening, we will not have enough time to complete all the necessary steps to be able to get the application in by March.
well, let me,
Or by May.
I'm not willing to go with that.
well, hang on. Let me think about this for a second. So with this grant, we don't necessarily have to tie that farmer's market into this grant at all, correct? Even the thoughts of it, it can be, we can just ask for grant money to keep moving on with this project we got out here. Correct?
Correct. Well, the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, I mean, we could do it for any park project.
Okay.
Yes, that we have. There are not really any big ticket items left in this park that I would say would be worth
Okay.
applying for. And I don't know if this was mentioned, so with the new budget, they increased next year's budget. Normally, there's about $6 million in Parks and Recreation Trust Fund money. With the state budget that came out, the 2-year budget, the next 2 cycles, which is the one that was just granted, so you've already had to have your application in. And the next one, there's $16 million to be allocated.
16 in the next one. Or
So,
both
so
of
the
them?
one that is due in May, so
Okay.
like if we, and those are non-recurring funds. So the state has put that extra money in there. When they do their next budget, we hope that they keep it high, but we don't know that. It could go back to the $6 million that it was 2 years ago.
So Nicole is asking if we want to move forward with the consulting, correct?
I just want to know, if we're gonna move forward on applying for the Parks and
Because of
Recreation
the
Trust
timing
Fund
of it
because of
to
the
get it
timing to get it done.
Are we committing to where we're putting the farmer's market then?
No.
Not
Or
necessarily.
we could move it to here if we wanted to, or.
You would not be able to, when you're applying, so when you're applying for the grant, it would be to develop the Bayer Farm property. You don't have to put the farmer's market there, but, so the parks plan and the farmer's market have a lot of obviously common things. They need parking, they need restrooms, they need other facilities that are basically, they're shared facilities with the farmer's market in the park. So we can't apply for this grant, say it's for a farmer's market on the Banner Farm property and then put a farmer's market here and use that money for that. The plan that we submit in the application, you would have to follow through on what we put in that plan in May. When we submit that application in May. You could have, okay,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I lost track. I don't remember this.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So basically, in our master park plan that we did last year, if we get any grant money or commit to doing anything on that background road property, at some point, we're gonna finish out this property as park, right?
Are you saying because of the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant?
Whenever we enter into that grant, we're committing
To what you do in that phase?
In that
in that phase. But then that's gonna make it really difficult to not do what's in that master park plan over there on Banner Farm Road.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think if you look at the park master plan for this property and you see how it's changed over the years. So what you put in that plan, but I mean, part of the park master plan process is to revisit it every few years because we know the needs of community change. We know once we're over on that property that there's maybe geographical uses that we thought were going to work there that now aren't. And when we originally did the master plan for this park, it had baseball fields and softball fields that after we got here, were determined that that was not the best use of the property. And that very much can happen with that piece. So what you put in phase 1 that you are submitting for the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, if you accept those grant dollars, you have to complete that phase. But if we decide later, say we don't include the walking trail, we decide that's not the best use of that property, we don't have to put in walking trails and we can amend our master plan accordingly.
So I got a council member needs to take a break, so we're gonna hold everything where it's at and Is staff ready to go again? I don't think we got anybody out of here, out of the audience. It's not that they need to be back for sure. I'll make, we need to make a motion or just come out of break.
Just come out of break.
We're just coming out of break. Okay. So. So let's make this two parts here. So, Mr. Lickius said that we need to look at the possibility of taking over the Britton's portion of their commitment to running the farmer's market. So we've got two options there. It's the way I see it. This first year, we could possibly ask for possibly even a council member to take over their portion, the collecting dues, overseeing it, or whatever. I don't know if anybody's interested. I don't know, we haven't discussed it as to if we have any staff time available. I could see that possibly being an issue right off the bat. I mean, it's on Saturdays and all that. I can't imagine anybody having free time to oversee that a little bit at this point without us putting somebody on, another person on staff, even if it's part-time. I see it as a possibility. Would you? Well, that's where I'm going with this. And I don't think it would be a lifetime commitment or a council commitment, but till we can figure out what we're going to do about staffing it. As far as, and it may still be at the school for now, but we get the Britons out of their situation. But it's a good thing for the community for it to be active and working. And if it falls apart, it may never get back up and going. So,
I'll be willing to step up and help, and I'd like to have the Britons involved
as
in
much as they
the
can.
first year as much as they can to help keep things going as smoothly as it's been going.
Do you think that'll fulfill their wishes, correct?
That will definitely help.
Okay.
But again, the details, we, as an ag advisory committee, are really not telling you what to do. We're just wanting to voice our support for the town getting involved both with property and people.
Okay. So the way I see it, we've eliminated one issue. Now let's get back to the grant. Let's just hear it by consensus. Do you see a need to apply for this grant at this point?
I have one more question.
Okay.
Is this like drop dead today a decision?
It's a drop dead decision today to apply for the grant, yes. If we do not begin work next week to start the phasing process, there's no way we will be able to get in all the required public meetings that we need to get into. Once that plan is developed, it's not the drop dead date for you to say, yes, we are gonna enact this plan is not till April. So it's basically, do you want us to start planning and phasing and figuring out what that true plan looks like to move to that property? And then you decide on if, yes, you want to fund it or not in April.
So
So there's no money right now. Sorry.
Other than just, again, the initial design, like the consultant fee, get the money needed for our public inputs that we have to do. It's again about $5,000 that is already can be allocated through current departmental budgets. It's not, we're not asking you for additional funds. It's funds that are is in our current budget. So we're not asking for capital funds or anything like that. We're basically just saying, are you okay if we start this process and use staff time? Because it is a big staff commitment and I don't want to spend tons and tons of time really putting this effort in if it's not something you all are interested in pursuing. But it is a big opportunity. I mean, putting in an extra $10 million of the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, it's not going to happen every year. And so, I guess you guys have decided if it's worth staff time and it's worth a small amount of money to look for the possibility, but the decision to actually dedicate the money doesn't come till April.
I think that there's too many unknowns.
From one unknown, how quick would the consultant need to be hired to pull this off by the April or the May deadline?
So we would go with the consultant who already did our master plan and who already has all that stuff. We could have a contract with them tomorrow and begin work next week. To be able to start the process. As I said, I have a timeline here of all the meetings that would have to be done before doing this. I mean, we have to, has to come to you all twice. So 2 separate meetings. It would have to come to you all for input and approval. We have to do at least 1 public meeting. We have to go to Parks Advisory Board twice. We have to go to Ag Advisory once and meet with the Farmers Market Board at least once. And then we have to go to at least 2 other civics groups, so things like the Lions Club, things like that, to get presentations and feedback. And so we would have to submit the draft application to the state resources by March the 15th.
March of 15th.
And then after we get there, so basically what the state does is they provide experts in this application process. They look at your application and they give you feedback and they say, well, you can make it stronger if you do this, or you missed this, go have that meeting that you missed, things like that. And then, so May 2nd would be the deadline. So we would by April 14th have to come back to you with the final plan. You all would have seen it once already. Parks Advisory Board would have seen it twice. Ag Advisory would have seen it once, and the Farmers Market would have seen it at least once. You know, just to meet those deadlines. And then so in April is when you would have, again, that's where the big decision is made. Like, yes, Nicole, mail that application, or let's hold on to this and relook at it next year. And again, that work doesn't go to waste.
As a council member, with the timeline that's proposed there, me knowing that the staff is at full song now, by proposing something to go over there on that property,
Off our property,
yeah, all,
off the risk side.
off of this property. I really need some time to sit down with staff and discuss, you know, how we're gonna do this, how many is it gonna take? As soon as we go over there, there's gonna be more than just structure and buildings and trails or grass cutting. There's a lot of stuff that I'm gonna need to know, I think, before I could turn you loose, even though I hate to miss this grant, because I've been in on a bunch of them. And to, like you say, $10 extra million don't come by easy. And that's my opinion on it. I'm just one though. You know,
So-
anybody else on this?
So just to ask the dirty question. So you've already got a timeline laid out. So that was not in our agenda packages. When was that timeline? Is that, let me back up. Why wasn't that timeline, let's say on Monday, put in our agenda packages for us to think about it this week before we get to the 11th hour? And then it's a drop dead, I think, as you said.
Well, I mean, I have been bringing this to the, what I think in October is when this timeline originally went to the Ag Advisory Committee where it was discussed. It was discussed in the November
I'm talking about the
committee.
council.
That's,
So let me offer this as a solution to the conversation, I think. The feeling I'm getting is there's a little bit of uncertainty amongst the board just because of the short time frame they have to work with. If we don't apply for it this year, yes, we're going to potentially miss out and the funding might decrease, but it will be available to a certain extent next year.
Okay.
Mayor, to your point, we would need, I think it's fair that we talk to you about staffing needs and the rest of the council. Going back to Mr. Snyder's suggestion earlier about putting on the visioning discussion, that seems to me, just based on what I'm reading tonight, is that's probably a better option for us to do. forego the grant application this year. And funding is available if the council decides to move forward with, say, a gravel parking lot. We can make that happen just as soon as council would like to do that. This was really much more, the Part F would cover beyond just the gravel lot, but from my understanding with the farmer's market, that's their priority, I guess you could say, is having a permanent location. So I'm going to suggest to the board that we, unless you have any questions, we'll get those answered, but otherwise we'll pick this up on the 14th. Does that work for everyone? Okay.
And Bert, I would pass it on that we've got help coming for the Britons, and it seems the consensus that the whole board is in favor of creating them a permanent place to be.
Absolutely.
Is there any other parts to the park that grant could apply to besides the farmer's market?
I would say, I mean, yes, we could use it for, depending on how we go through with the phase process. But I think the bottom line is, if we develop that park over there, or when we develop that park over there, the parts that the farmer's market is going to use are also the absolute base you would need for a park. You need parking, you need restrooms, you need a lot of those base facilities that, whether it's being used for the farmer's market and a park, or it's just being used for a park, it's going to be the same facility. So you're still, your first thing you have to build is still, you need places for people to park and you need places for people to pee. So if those things don't come first, then you're not going to be able to do, whether it's a playground, you can't just put a playground over there and not have the other essential facilities. You can't necessarily put trails over there without a place for people to park.
Right. But the way I was understanding it was you wanted to apply for that grant for the farmer's market.
I think it's a win. It helps two stones, right? That park was designed when we went through the park master plan process.
Right.
And we included public input and we included lots of discussions with the farmer's market. That plan met the needs both for the farmer's market and the recreational needs of the community. So I think it does both. I think this came about because the Britons came to the Ag Advisory Committee asking for that support. And then that's where the discussion came up of the permanent location, when we already had an identified place in our plans that was developed with the farmer's market and with public input. So I think that's why we just saw an opportunity with the increase in funding in the state budget that we can, again, apply for a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, meet some of the recreational needs that are in our parks plan, but also support the farmer's market. It does both.
Okay. Well, if we're gonna apply for that grant and for it to be the park for over there, then we could do it for the park over there and not have the farmer's market involved in that. And we could have them do their own down there, because the farmer's market, it's a farmer's market. It needs to be functional and agricultural. And, I don't think to apply for a grant for the farmer's market of that size would be, what they needed. So if you wanted to use it for the park, then, they could call it for the park instead of for the farmer's market.
Okay, yeah, I just, the farmer's market, when we developed the plan, said that met their needs, that the plans that were developed for that property met the needs of the farmer's market that they're looking for. So I mean, if you wanted to apply and not include the farmer's market as part of that plan, you certainly could move forward with the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant. If we don't think that wants to be a permanent home for the farmer's market, then we certainly can look at not making that the focus.
Right.
Is that what you're
Well, I
saying?
mean, are you wanting to apply for that to work on the park over there? Because I know you're wanting to put bicycles and stuff on top.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly could, if that wants to be the focus of our phase one, we certainly could make the focus, maybe a smaller parking lot, the trails, things like that. If that's where through the phasing process, that's where we decided we could certainly look at other parts of that park that were not farmers market focused. We certainly could if that's was council's priority.
I'll just say once again that my concern would be Daniel we didn't really know this was coming, this part of this was coming, or at least I didn't. So he hadn't had time to figure out how he would staff this. It being all site, it's going to create more staff immediately, I would think.
Are we funded?
Yeah, how we're going to fund it in his budget for next year and the year after. And there's just all kind of elements in it that I don't think we have looked into enough to turn the grant loose, as bad as I hate to say it. So anything else? Okay, so we're gonna move on to, with no action on that, we're gonna move on to E with the quarterly financial dashboard.
You found a copy of the dashboard at your places because I did find a couple of errors in the one that got emailed out and was also in your packets. I'll just quickly just point that out. So, and then I'll explain this. Back in November, we created a capital project ordinance for the restroom shelter building. And we moved $500,000 into a special fund outside of your budget. So that reduced your budget to $4,426,100. So that changed all of our percentages on how much revenue is actually come in. Also, taxes for motor vehicles and your penalties account under revenues. I had numbers in the wrong pews. But anyway, moving forward, since I mentioned your revenue percentages, right now, this shows that your revenues are at 84% of your budget, which is tremendously high, but you have to keep in mind that the ARPA monies are still there. So it is actually at 54.7%, which is running a little ahead of the budget, but that's not a bad thing. It's never a bad thing to be ahead on budget, on revenues. Specifically, your sales tax, your utility sales tax, and your ABC revenues are all grouped together. But it's your sales tax that are significantly higher than we're budgeted. They were much higher last year, and we weren't sure if the trend would continue or if it was an anomaly based on the pandemic and people not shopping anywhere but from home. And they've continued so far, but then so has the pandemic. Your permits and fees are at 90% of the budget, 96% of the budget, which kind of indicates the volume that Mike is dealing with permitting. As far as expenditures, yes.
Just real quick on the revenue, I just want to point something out quickly. If you look at that top table, the third line from the bottom, it says PAL bill. Quarter end was 91 and change, and the total actual fiscal year is 156,435, and the budgeted amount was 135. For the newer folks on the board, the town entered the PAL bill program this year for the first time, which enables it to receive funding to maintain roads, and we've maintained Town Center Drive as a road. It's based off population and road mileage. Bottom line is, when we were preparing the budget, the state hadn't passed the budget yet and hadn't in a couple of years, so we used the numbers from the previous allotment. With the state passing the budget, they increased the allotment that everyone received, and that's how we ended up just about $20,000 over budget, because it was based on our estimate. Now we have the actual numbers. So I just wanted to point that out. That's why we're so far ahead on that one.
Okay, on expenditures, we're pretty much where I would expect us to be at 48.9% of the budget. That's the lower chart. And the encumbrances that are shown on the last line are for 2,417 reflects travel that's been approved but has not been taken yet for a conference. just real quickly, on moving to the right side, at the bottom, your cash distribution. Basically, most of your money is at North Carolina Capital Management Trust. For the newer people, this is, how do I explain this? It's a trust that's been set up with the state's approval for government funds. It's investing them without the same risk that you would have in a stock market. Rates are very low, but it is very secure, and our ARPA funding is there, which is why it's so high. Also, certificates of deposit rates are just so low, they're almost non-existent. And we are trying to keep our monies somewhat diversified, so they're not all in the same place. The top chart on the right, your fund balance commitments. Basically, we have a lot of money right now. This reflects in the orange your ARPA money. That is right now, we'll talk about how to spend that later. There's a certain amount of money we reserve for cash flow because most of our funds come in through taxes, property taxes. And there is 4 to 5 month window where we collect the majority of our money. So when we have excess, we invest it for a little, but then most of the rest of the year, we have to pull from that money. So we reserve some of our cash just for cash flow. We have some reserves set up for construction or expansion of this town hall, for future park construction or equipment purchasing. We have a reserve for law enforcement that was set up under Mr. Gauss's last tenure on the board. And some reserve for building maintenance. When we paid off this loan, USDA had required us to have to put away each year for building maintenance. So we took the remainder of those funds that we had not spent yet, once the loan was over, and created our own reserve. So that, for example, if the HVAC goes out, we actually have some funds we can pull from. And that leaves your total uncommitted fund balance of $3,879,259.
So on your pie chart, does that ARPA fund money, does that include the money that we agreed to send to the fire department?
It does right now.
That's still included.
Yes, there are many. There are several policies we have to adopt before we can actually spend that money. And we're working on that. But that target keeps changing on us, and hopefully with the issuance of the final rule, it won't move again. So we'll know what we need to create. And then those funds will come out of your general fund and go into another account. And then we'll be able to work with the fire department. There's a formula that we need to pay them by. So it's a little, I'd love to write a check today. It's all in the details. Anyway, any questions?
Yes, any questions for Sue on the dashboard? No? We're moving forward. Discussion of food trucks ordinances.
I would like to discuss the food truck ordinances and all the rules that have applied and that are coming forward to apply.
Okay.
And I believe we have a speaker on that. Do you want to hear from them?
Well, yes, I do. Well, do you have anything in particular before we hear from him to see if it's a general consensus or?
Well, I think they've got way too many hoops to jump through to be here in Mills River, and I think it's deterring more from coming to Mills River. The residents all say they want more restaurants, and that's not gonna happen on a dime, but they are happy with food trucks. I've talked to several, and I would like to see them be more welcomed in Mills River.
Okay.
Shannon,
Yes.
is that I'm perfectly fine with hearing from Jerry, since he's provided all these emails.
Right.
Back and forth between him and the town. Is that, I do have a couple of questions just for clarification for him. So. Is that,
Yeah, Jerry, if you don't mind, step up, and give us your name, and we'll go from there.
All right, my name's Jerry Brady.
can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm seeing that there's two different things here. Are we looking at our food truck ordinance in general?
We're just,
Or are we talking to Jerry tonight about a problem that he had?
I have that exact same question.
So
Yes.
I would just like a little clarification on what.
okay,
And I would just look, real quick, I'm gonna interrupt. When you leave, you have an extra copy of those
I got it
emails
here.
since you provided it to council.
Yeah.
I need it for my records if you don't mind.
Give it to you, sir.
okay, and we're definitely hearing, Jerry asked to be put on the agenda, so we're definitely hearing his, issues. And we're probably, in my opinion, this would be something that we would need to put on our visioning, starting in March and versus getting into it in depth tonight, to be honest.
We can do that.
Because, I feel free to discuss it as we hear his issues. We'll discuss what he's had going on amongst us a little bit to get our minds thinking, because I've got some negatives and I've got some positives on it in my personal self. But let's hear Jerry's, issues and what's went on, and then we'll talk some more.
The main reason I'm here is just because, you know, I actually, to cut it off to a short thing, I spent a pretty good bit of money under a permit that I was issued with a site plan drawing on. And then after I spent all this money, then it was brought to my attention that I couldn't leave the food truck where it was. I had to move it to another part of the property. So then I had to go and pay an electrician, James Tracy, and the emails are all here and the receipts are here. You can see the dates are highlighted and all that, but I had to pay him to install electrical, and I'm not even, hadn't even put the plumbing cost on here from before. You know, your builder, you know how it is. But I had to pay him to install electrical on the side of the building, you know, where the food truck was a bit gonna go in the first place. Which, you know, in my opinion, would have been a better place for it anyway, because the traffic would have flown a lot better through there, you know, and the whole issue was the front of the building. So, you know, what do you call the front of the building, in my opinion? You know, one side of the building where I've got the food trucks now, which is supposedly the side of the building, is where all the entrances to the businesses are. So I would think that would be the front of the building, but it's, I guess the front of the building is the part closest to the road is what they're saying. But I think I should be refunded the money that I spent between those two times, you know, because I was permitted to do it in that place to begin with, and then I had to move it. And I kind of wanted to bring it then and kind of fight against it, but Mike, the guy that's doing the barbecue truck, he said, no, Jerry, I've been dealing with this stuff for 8 months. He said, I've either got to get started or I'm going bankrupt. So I said, all right, we'll move it and, you know, we'll get you going. So that's what we did. And as you can see in these emails here, you know, the first correspondence was July 30th. August the 2nd was another one. I think this is when he told me the property was allowed to establish a food truck park for principal use. You know, gave me the permit fee and all, I did that. And
If I can stop you just a minute, you remember what that permit fee was?
it's $200.
Okay.
And I'd already paid $25 for one for a single truck, you know, so that was when I went from a single truck to having two.
Okay.
There. And honestly, the other truck he really don't even do business there, maybe a day, three days a month is what I would say, maybe the bus goes there. But August 2nd, let's see. Tracy cleaned these things up for me. She's one more thorough than mine. My barbecue truck, we were starting moving, so we thought we put it all in there. We were starting to move it that week, you know, and everything was going fine. August 18th, he issued my zoning permit, 4176 Haywood Road, sent it by email, and I had to sign it and all that, which we did that, you know. And then September 2nd is when he came back to me and told me we had to move it. Him and Daniel have discussed it and had issues with it being in front of the building, which is what I was referring to earlier. You know, so that's when I had to move it. And then if you look on the receipts and stuff here, you'll see that the work that was done, James came and did that on the side of the building, put the electrical and all that in there before, you know, between the permit, between the permit being issued and this right here, the September 2nd date. So once we did this, then I had to move it to the other side of the property. And I had to run, you know, I had to have it all moved and reapply for permits and, you know how it goes, had to redo all of that stuff. So I've got that's the two, let's see, I think those are over here on this side, the two, receipts from James, basically, is what that amounts to.
And that amount comes to,
3,000. What's on the little sticker, 3,000?
No, that 3,000 is just the improvements that I've done to the property
Oh, okay.
for the zoning. And I'm not done yet. I mean, I've just done certain things we talked about, the things I had to do. And I've done a lot of it, but I still got to plant trees and plant some shrubs and put a thing around the dumpster, which, you know, I mean, it's kind of crazy to me that I've been doing business there for 20 years pretty much. And then all of a sudden I got to put a string around the dumpster and plant trees, but that's what we got to do. That's what we got to do. I guess that's going to be talked about at another time too, but it's 965.03 was the first number. And then the moving it was 555.25.
And I don't have the plumbing in it.
Yeah, I didn't think, but I'm not worried about the plumbing, you know, so those two right there were the two main things, you know, that was the two costs, and it's out of miles and all there.
okay. So while you're up at the podium, could you give us a little feedback on, you mentioned a bunch of issues you've had and things that you don't feel like is right as far as the situation you've been put in. And I'm asking this because we're gonna read this.
Were you talking about some of the zoning?
Yeah,
some of the
any
rules with the food truck park?
issues that you have with it, just so if all the council members gets a feel for it while you're at the podium, maybe so you can come back another night.
Like one thing that stands out in my mind is parking. I mean, I've got ample spaces there to park for anybody. But it says here that you have to have, you know, painted with white lines. You have to have designated for the food truck, you know, so the way it is at my building, anybody can park anywhere there that they want to, you know, and we've never had any issues with that, and it's still that way today. I mean, today, the barbecue guy told me he had the busiest lunch he's ever had, and every business there is open and going fine, and we had no issues with parking, no issues with anything. So I just don't understand why you would have to designate certain spots for this business and certain spots for this business, especially when we've been doing it this way. You know, I didn't have a food truck there before, but I've been doing it that way the whole time I've been there, you know, and I've never had any trouble. You know, curbs at the front of the parking spots. I don't understand why you have to have that. I mean, part of my parking is gravel out there. It's been there for years, you know, and I've added some more. But there's just certain things like that, like planting the, you know, all those trees up through there. I mean, I've planted 2 maple trees already. I just don't understand why you would have to plant pine trees all the way up through there, you know, especially when the building, the primary use is already there and was there before, which I realize I'm changing and doing something different there. But what's the difference in 1 food truck and 2 food trucks? Why would you have to, you know what I'm saying? It's just gonna be hard to, and I'm, you know, I was planning on doing it, but it's gonna be hard to plant that kind of stuff up there and the shrubs in between and all that, you know, it's just kind of a.
Daniel, Michael, somebody. Does the food truck ordinance require designated painted parking places just for the food truck?
It requires parking spaces for food trucks when it's a food park like this. And they have to be marked in some way. It can be a curb, it can be paint. What else can it? Alice is a reward.
The only thing the food,
I think
park
it's addressed in
ordinance
this, one of these
states is
emails.
that, sorry, the only thing the food park ordinance states is a minimum of 4 parking spaces shall be provided for each designated temporary vendor spot. Daniel and I looked back at the ordinance of definition of a parking space, and it says it has to be delineated in some way, and that's what we applied.
So the town staff took it upon themselves to designate that it has to be painted.
No, that, and I wasn't here, but I'm smart enough to know that the planning board during this ordinance right developed these standards and brought them to council at that time, and they went through. Well, I mean, he's reading it from the ordinance book.
Well, is that, you're right, you're probably right, Chad, but let me give you an example. Is that you go to Mills River Veterinarian Clinic, the reason that driveway is not paved, because there's no rules for gravel parking lot.
Exactly.
And so they don't have to be painted or anything.
But you gotta remember that they was grandfathered in,
Right.
and he's trying to fit under an ordinance that's in place when he goes to do it.
Right. Now, is that another question I have for Jerry? So where is the front of your building?
That's a good question.
No, is that, I'm asking you.
The front of my building, I would consider to be the side that you go into all the businesses on, you know. The only door on the roadside is the single door into the laundromat. There's a double door to the laundromat on the other side, you know, where all the rest of them, and the trucking business is on that side, and the barber shop is on that, you know, that side of the building. So, you know, it's
Is
one
it
of those things.
now?
What would you consider the front?
Is that I would consider the front of the building that faces the main road where the mailboxes are. Now, it's where the laundromat is. If you're coming from Hendersonville, if you're coming from Mills River, then you actually see the front of the building. So that's what I consider the mailboxes. And you have a door going into a business on the front. So is that where you wanted to put it to begin with?
I was wanting to put it to the side of that front, what you're saying is the front
Over-
over there, yeah,
Is
over to the
that
side there.
over next to the veterinarian? clinic?
Yes, close to that chiropractor.
That's right.
Yes.
Fine, wait, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, you're fine. I was just gonna say it's got the, you know, it's got the ordinance here. It says, one item I wanted to note, I didn't say parking lot landscaping in your site plan, only both are landscaping on the right property line. In my previous email stated, one large deciduous tree, 6 shrubs must be planted around the parking lot for every 10 parking spaces. You have approximately 20 on your site plan, so 2 large trees, 12 shrubs must be planted around the parking lot area. Additionally, 1 tree and 6 shrubs also required for every 1,500 square foot of additional parking lot and driveway area outside of the parking spaces. Estimate approximately 4,500 square foot of extra area, so 3 additional large trees and 18 shrubs must be planted.
So I know this don't affect what we're trying to get at, but you've probably got a number in your head that you're gonna have to spend to fulfill that obligation. Would you care to reveal that to us tonight, what it's gonna be?
Well, I've got over 3,000 in it right now. It's probably gonna be another, you know, those trees, you're figuring just for the pine trees, you know, I'm thinking about putting the giant arborvitae in there. What are you looking, $100 a piece? You gotta have what, 12 of them or something like that, and that's not planted, that's just for the trees. So you're looking at probably, what do you figure, $6,000 to $8,000 total, we'll have for a project.
Would that include surrounding the dumpster with a blind?
I'm gonna say probably, yeah, you probably, in that $6,000 to $8,000 total range, yes.
Okay, so that 96203 number, that other number you get me.
That's what I spent just to move it.
Okay,
After I was permitted, that was, I feel like that was not my fault there.
and those two numbers, do you have the total of those two? I don't have the package you give me right here in front of me.
I should have,
Jerry, were those numbers 96503 and 55525?
yes.
Then his total is 1,520.28.
Okay. Now, I know in the 12 years I was here, we've never got in a situation like this that I can remember where it come before council to reimburse someone for,
We had one time,
it did.
one time.
Okay.
He said, it's just, I forgot who it was, he said, reimburse them $500 or something. I can't remember what it was.
There
Well,
was a rezoning or something like that.
That's what it
actually.
was, the church
Mhm.
yeah.
on there next to Marlowe School.
So from a staff standpoint, is there a process if we wanted to consider this?
You can certainly consider the application fee. There's no question about refunding that. We would have to check on the legality of reimbursement for any of those private expenditures. I just don't know off the top of my head if that's legal or not, but we can certainly find out.
Okay.
So what are we considering?
Well, he is, the way I understand, and I ain't talked to him personally, but as I see he's come up here, he's approached us with the possibility of, he's not, I don't think, am I wrong in saying you're not looking to get your application fee or any of that back? You would
No, I
decide
was
to be
just wondering.
reimbursed for the 15/20/28 for having to move it from where it originated to having to move it to the other side of what, but what I need to hear is
And
the
all the
other
reason
side
I
of
was
the
mad is because I
story.
was permitted to do it there to begin with, I started, I didn't start anything until I was sure about it, you know what I'm saying? And I'm
So,
open about that. I mean,
can I ask for staff's,
If I could just read from the last paragraph of the August 18th email, which was from me. I did issue the permit due to the hardship that Big Mike's Barbecue was experiencing that we discussed in person. And I stated in the last paragraph of this email, I am happy to meet you at your property to discuss this further and or confirm the suitability of the locations as shown on your site plan for the food trucks. Make sure that when the electrical services for the food trucks are installed, that you have confirmed the food truck locations with me beforehand and that they are parked at least 15 feet away from your side property line and 50 feet away from your front property line. You may need to reconfigure or amend your site plan and move the food trucks to the right side of the building so they can comply with the setback requirements. As it is measured on the Henderson County GIS, I don't think a food truck will fit in front of your building and comply with the front yard setback requirement. And I've emailed Mr. and Mrs. Frady multiple times since then to try and revisit this issue. I emailed them just this week and that was the first time I heard that.
So having what you just said, did you, let me rephrase that, did the town issue a permit for Jerry to have a food truck in the front, I'm gonna call it, on the 191 side?
Yes.
Is that fair? On the 191 side of the building, yes or no?
The town issued a food park permit for Jerry with an incomplete site plan asking for additional information in order to accommodate Big Mike's Barbecue and the hardship he was experiencing at the time.
And I did turn in a site plan at the time with the drawing of that on there.
And that's why I stated additional information was needed because I didn't think it was compliant. And again, I regret issuing the permit now because we're in the situation, but I was just trying to help the guy out.
I understand.
Seems to me like there's just an awful lot of zoning and issues with, a guy's trying to run a business, I don't see why you have to. I think it's a little bit overkill.
Whenever we did this food truck ordinance, Jerry's just a little background, I know you weren't here. I think the whole idea of doing the food park thing was, we kind of thought, and we went into it, or I did, thinking it would be a standalone business on a piece of property that didn't have anything else going on. So whenever you're incorporating it into an existing business, like yours,
Yes.
I could see where there might be some confliction there. But we tried to make it very, I thought we tried to make it very minimal, the requirements. So maybe we did overlook a couple of things about, you know,
Secondary use, maybe, because
Or,
hearing it, y'all
you know,
thought it was gonna be more of a standalone thing.
that's the way I understood we were working on it before. I don't remember talking a whole lot about being a food park in addition to an existing business. So, whenever we were talking about, so maybe we did overlook a few things, so, but, I mean, we can revisit that.
So Jerry, let's cut to the chase. How, as being a business owner, an existing business owner, having gone through our process, tell me what you think.
Going through the process was, I mean, it was pretty smooth there, you know, that's the only hiccup we had was that, and I kind of, you know, thought it was done, I didn't like the way that was handled, you know. Because I mean, I came down here and I talked to him and we went over all this and, you know, I was issued a permit and I had a site plan there. And, you know, it gave me the requirements. It was 15 feet off the property line, 50 feet from the road, you know. So I thought I was in the clear there, you know, but we should have, I guess, you know, yeah.
Am I thinking correct that when you first initially give him the plan, it was just for Big Mike's, the gray trailer?
No, I
Or
got,
for both?
well, when I first did the application, I did for one, and then I came back for two, when Mike came to me, and that's when I drew up. Because with one, I don't even think I had to have a site plan or anything. It was just for two.
Is that correct, Mike?
I'd have to look at the permit to remember, but I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay.
And there was no landscape requirements and everything for the one food truck, right?
Correct, because the
So whenever you
definition
move into the multiple food trucks, that you have to meet these other requirements.
But you know, there's food trucks, like there's one, the pizza place, you guys are all familiar with that. It was right across the street, same property. They moved right down the street, dead in front of their building. I mean, you know, there's no doubt about that. And from what I understand, they're not even permitted, right?
You're right, yeah.
And I mean, I've tried to go through the process and do everything by the book. I mean, I have. I mean, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. And it seems like I'm getting punished for doing it that way instead of just, you know, throwing an extension cord out there and going at it, you know. I just don't understand why. I guess that's what you get for trying to do it right, you know. I mean, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Well, we're proud of you for doing it right, don't get me wrong. But we're seeing, or I'm seeing as a town council, we've got some stuff we need to work through.
Mhm.
And you brought it to our foresight and then, but even tonight, you know, I've heard from staff that we don't even know if we can give you anything back, but I would be fair in saying also, Daniel, if we give him the permit application fees back, he's really no longer has a permit of any kind, correct?
No, you can refund the fee
Okay.
and the
Okay.
permit would still be valid.
Well, let's do that right now.
Well, you make the motion. Now, let me get something correct. So it was, he's paid $200 for his initial permit and then $25 for a secondary truck,
I
correct?
paid $25 to begin with. That was for one truck.
Okay.
That was before Mike came to
I'm
me.
with you now.
And then Mike came to me and asked me about bringing his across the street. And that's when I came and I did the $200 fee for the park.
And Mike gets the barbecue, not Mike Malinchat.
Yes,
Exactly.
Mike
That's
Barkley.
why I said Michael.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's in my-
So if you're wanting to do that, Roger, you make the motion and I'll need a second. And then we're gonna have more discussion, just a slight discussion on some other stuff here.
Okay. So,
Microphone, please.
oh, sorry. So what is the total amount you come up with?
I mean, if I'm correct, 225 on permits.
Would it be all right if the motion stated that we refund Mr. Frady all of his permit fees associated with these permits instead of a specific dollar amount?
Yeah.
Just so that we can confirm what was actually paid in the system.
Is that? Okay, you caught me off guard, David. Is that I make a motion that we refund Jerry Frady all of his permit fees. Daniel, what else needs to be included?
I think that's it. Permit fees for the food park and food truck applications.
And along with that motion, we will consider other fees at a later date, or other expenses at a later date. Does that work?
I just want to confirm, was your name on the check or was there a business name on the check?
I think my name was on the check.
Okay.
I can go back in my checkbook and look, give me time to do that.
Do you need it in the motion or maybe not?
It was mine and Stacy's name on the check.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that we don't refund you when it was actually a business
Right, yeah. No,
and that the motion is appropriate. Thank you.
So Sue, you've got the motion?
Yes.
Roger, I need a second. Sanders, second. All in favor of giving Jerry the permit money back? Aye. Okay, Jerry, feel free to sit down a minute. We may get you back up in a second, but I'm gonna try to move to as quick as I can because it's almost 9:30 to do this. We still got one more to go. You know, I mean, I know we're this council and everybody has went through this food truck ordinance to establish it for certain reasons. I know the county and all takes care of the sanitation part of it, you know, and the health of the people. Envisioning, I think we need to set aside a little time to revisit this food truck ordinance and food truck park, just to tweak it a little bit. And we need to think of on these permits, as I hear these permits, because I wasn't here, I didn't see it, I hadn't had a chance to read that yet. But as a standalone business, you take these food trucks competing against Mills River Restaurant, a brick and mortar building, Bojangles. Now, I'm trying to cover all the bases here. I want everybody to think about this between now and March and April. We got all these big businesses that's trying to make it too. And their tax revenues to Mills River would be way, way, way more than this 225 to get going. Now, he's got expenses in putting the accessories to get them hooked up to, but we still have other things I feel like we need to think about. Don't get me wrong, I think food trucks and food trailers are a nice amenity to the community, but it also needs to fit in the revenue to not force the big businesses out real quick. And it may be what's coming anyway. I'm just trying, as a business person, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm Mills River Grocery, I've got $1 million piece of property. And I don't know that right now, Mills River is not moving as much food as Big Mike is. And that's not, but from a permit standpoint, to get in business for $225, you're not going to, I mean, I know he's got a trailer, I know he's got all that, but you know, it's probably registered outside of town. We're probably not getting any of the tax revenue back on that.
No, it's registered in Mills River, and it's sitting on a piece of property that I pay quite a bit of tax to the town of Mills River on. Because it's, you know, you gotta consider that too. It's sitting on my piece of property that I'm paying the town of Mills River.
But you are making,
This is revenue for me.
but you are making a profit off of the trailer sitting there, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm
I'm
just,
just saying, I know the restaurant has brick and mortar, but there's brick and mortar building there as well, you know,
and I understand that, but you know, that food doesn't come out those doors, is my feeling. You know, it's coming out of the trailer doors.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking it 100%. I know it's got a place for everything. But I think when this was all thought of, that they really thought that these was going to establish, it sounds to me like in parks with multiples there, with restroom facilities and parking on that side, instead of them popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
And then
As a
Which I have all
secondary
those.
use.
as a secondary use, yeah, is secondary use. And then we've got some unpermitted ones. We're gonna have to discuss what we're gonna do and how we're gonna, you know, because somebody's, if we start policing that, then we're putting more staff involved in policing that. So envisioning, everybody needs to take some time to consider all these things and think it through.
We have an open position right now that you're trying to fill, Daniel, for an enforcement officer.
For a part-time enforcement
Part-time
officer.
enforcement. So would this fall under
Mhm.
his job description?
would.
Okay. All right, any more discussion on the food trucks at this point? Do we want to, get staff to check in with our attorney on if there is even a possibility to reimburse Jerry any of his funds for his, having to move it, let's say?
Yeah,
I don't know
we'll-
how else to word it.
We will look into that.
Thank you. All right, we will be back in touch with you on that too. All right, we're moving on. So only thing, do we probably want to go ahead and get staff updates and all before we go into our closed session?
Yes, please.
All right, to town clerk.
Only thing I'm gonna say is for council to please consider setting up an account on the website so that you can sign up for agendas from council or any of the boards and for the minutes. I think, James, you've already done this. And if you want help, please contact us. We're happy to do it for you.
Just make me one and send me my password.
I will, but I'll text you when I do it because it's going to send you a confirmation and ask you to set up the password. It's going to go to your email.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
sounds complicated.
You have to do it in 48 hours.
Is
Let you
this,
know when I got a couple of days.
is this mandatory
It's not,
or
mandatory.
optional?
It's optional. We're trying to streamline the agenda packet delivery process, and that's part of the way that we're doing it now.
But it also would give you the opportunity to receive planning board packets, board of adjustment packets, agriculture advisory. I mean, it just gives you a chance to become more informed. Also to see, if you sign up for it, you're gonna see if the park has an alert, or if we have an emergency alert. All of that would come through this website now.
Is that all you got to say?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Cliff.
Good evening. I just wanted to go through this real quick for new members. This can be, and Shannon, you've never seen this format either. So quickly, the year in taxes, the lien on personal and real property is created on the 1st of January. You, as a body, set your tax rate by the 1st of July. The bills go out in August. The following January 5th is the last day to pay without a 2% penalty. So that includes mail postmarked on the 5th, but for whatever reason straggles in afterwards. North Carolina statute says that I have to report the delinquent balance as of that delinquent date, January 5th, in the first, I believe it's the first, by the first meeting in February, before I can actually send out delinquent notices. So that's what this report is. And it shows that last year, our on-time percentage was 94.33%. This year, our on-time percentage is 94.97%, which is the highest it's ever been. Just for some perspective, in 2018, our on-time collection rate was 92%. So I know for the council members that have been here all fall, I've been telling you every month that we are 15% behind collections the year before. I guess right before Thanksgiving, we put our famous / infamous signs out. And I can tell you, I don't know if they've helped for sure, but I can tell you that last December, we took in $555,000. This December, after the signs went out, we took in $950,000. So, and we have this amazing, in my opinion, on-time collection rate.
And you could possibly look at that another way, if you say the Mills River citizens at 2%.
This is very true.
Anything else?
We
Arlen?
did have some, well, we had in-office feedback, sort of 50-50. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it. But another interesting little fact is we almost always have people come in on January 6th to pay their bills that they think are on time, and they leave here very angry. Somewhere between 5 and 15 people a year. This year, we had no one. So we caught our 15% up. We made Randy happy.
Yeah, I called her.
I'm happy too.
In a fit, I thought we weren't gonna do a budget.
Oh,
Everybody's- she-
That's all I have.
She put me at ease.
Okay, Parks and Rec.
Yes, a few quick updates. So our picnic shelter bid package is complete. So we were putting that out for advertisement tomorrow. So we will put that on our website. We'll put a public advertisement out. We'll send it to folks. So if there's anyone out there listening in TV land or anyone that wants to get the specifications, we will have all that information on our website tomorrow to bid on the picnic shelter restroom facility. Also, our riverbank construction will start next week. Weather dependent, if we get 18 inches of snow, that may get pushed back a little bit, but at the current time, we plan to start on Tuesday on that project, which has been a long time coming. We've made sure we got the news in the papers. The big thing for the public to know is that the back half of the rear walking trail will be closed during the duration of construction. So that includes the fishing pier, the canoe kayak launch, and that back parking lot. People will be able to walk, what I say, a horseshoe around half of the back trail. And then, of course, the whole front section of the park will still be open, but people should just know it's going to be closed. Other than that, just a couple of dates to remember. So January 28th will be the next Mills River Blood Drive, which takes place right in this town council room. They are in a severe shortage of blood right now. So anyone who is eligible and able to come on January 28th, if you go to the Red Cross website, search Mills River, and you'll be able to schedule an appointment there. And then also note February 1st will be our the next free produce market where we partner with the YMCA, where we give out basically free produce to anyone in need to help reduce food waste and get healthy foods into the community. So I think will be our third one, and it's been very well attended. So the next one for that will be on February 1st from 3 to 4 p.m. down by the large picnic shelter. And just last thing I have, that we do have an open staff position in the Parks Department. We have a park maintenance worker position open. So people can go to our website, applications are there, and you have to get some good applicants. So if you know anybody who's interested, definitely let them know.
So I would assume that on the riverbank restoration, the construction will be working in and out the lower bar driveway into the gravel parking lot.
Correct. Construction access will be that parking lot, so that parking lot will be closed to the public. There won't be any construction equipment access from the main part of the parking lot.
We probably just need to make sure that gate gets closed every night to keep
It's,
somebody.
yeah, we've already, we'll have a double lock system with the
Okay.
contractors, so they'll have their lock, we'll have ours, so that way if us or law enforcement need to get in, we can, but then the construction company can get in as needed.
Perfect, good thing. All right, zoning administrator.
Couple updates, the planning board approved the cottages at Roper Farm development, a 32-lot major residential subdivision at their January 4th meeting. It was the 200, 300 block of Banner Farm Road. We're expecting a major special use permit application to come in tomorrow for a proposed multifamily townhome development off Jeffers Road. And in the next couple of days, also a minor special use permit application and variance from the Asheville Regional Airport for an air traffic control tower and terminal radar approach facility at one of the parcels at the edge of our jurisdiction behind GF Linamar. Recently completed the review of the Mills River Crossing Phase 4 major residential subdivision development. This would add 19 single-family lots west of what we call Mills River Crossing North. Expecting revised plans back from them February or March planning board meeting, depending upon when they get back to us. We're continuing to develop at the staff level a watershed and stormwater ordinance for the new council members. Henderson County basically relinquished their review authority for watershed and stormwater permits in our jurisdiction. So we're having to take it over, but we have to develop an ordinance first. So you should look for that in an upcoming meeting. And then fun fact, in the last month and a half, we've permitted co-location and installation of dish wireless equipment on 3 cell towers in town. So I think any new wireless service is a good sign. So that's all I got.
Okay.
So where's the air traffic control tower going?
It's basically, if you're looking at the runways, sorry, I'm always looking at GIS every day. If you're looking at a map of the airport and the runways going northwest, it's literally just to the west. There's 2 small strips of land behind the whole Ferncliff part. So behind GF Linamar, behind Sierra Nevada, and behind the new 250,000 square foot warehouse out there, that again is right adjacent to the runways that they're looking to put it on.
So is it going to be behind Sierra Nevada and Suncap and so forth?
Yeah, all the way back.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thanks, Daniel.
Mike, is it both of these parcels?
Yeah, it's actually the southern one only.
This one?
Yeah, that.
So is that Jeff Linamar
This is
right there?
Correct.
So my first question, how will the control tower building influence Jeff Linamar's room for expansion?
Well,
We don't know.
we don't know. We'll have to see all that when they give us the application and all the site plans.
You see what I'm saying? Is that the airport has 2 other sites that they can put that on. So personally, I don't want to gum up GF Linamar since they already own the property.
It's the airport's private property.
No, this is what I'm saying. So right in here is where this is going to go roughly.
Correct, and that's airport
Okay.
property.
So, and this may be beforehand, but if they build, let's say, an 80-foot tower. So is that's going to mushroom out. Okay? Which could theoretically roll over here in the GF Linamar's property. You see
That's
this?
not in any of the proposals, but again, we don't have a formal
Okay.
submittal, so I can't answer that.
Yeah, we'll have to wait for the application. and
Right.
their site plan.
That's fine.
Is that all you have?
That's it. Thank you.
Town manager.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple quick updates. I mentioned earlier the American Rescue Plan Act funding, ARPA. Last year, they issued an interim rule which basically stated you can do X, Y, and Z with these funds. The town is slated to receive just over $2 million over the next 18 months. We've received half of that already. You saw that in your dashboard. The challenge with the interim final rule was that it was very, very, very specific about what you could use the funding for. And Mills River being a limited service government, meaning we don't have water, sewer, police, and fire, those things. It was looking a little bit difficult to figure out how we can make the best use of those funds. However, last Thursday, the Department of Treasury issued the final rule, for the ARPA funding. And it greatly increases the eligible expenditures that the town can put money towards. And in particular, one of the things that is really good news for a lot of communities is you could use your funding for general government services to the extent you lost revenue. Mills River, like a lot of places, actually did not lose revenue during the pandemic because sales tax went up so much. So we actually exceeded revenues expectations. So in that case, we were stuck with, well, we can't use that. However, now the Treasury's new rule states that they assume everyone lost $10 million, which means you can use the entirety of your allocation, unless it exceeds 10 million, you can use the entirety of it for general government services. So it greatly broadens the scope of what the town can do with those funds. I'm not prepared to issue any concrete statements at this point because the rule just came out on Thursday, a week ago. Sue and I have been in a couple of webinars, notoriously not very helpful webinars, unfortunately. But we're going to start speaking with our attorney to figure out what are some concrete examples of things that we can spend that money on that would most benefit the citizens of Mills River. Any questions on that particular thing? The last thing I'll mention, go ahead, Roger.
Oh, is that, I know that you probably got the live stuff, and that's fine. Wasn't we gonna come up with some type of application? Or some,
For
is it-
nonprofits? Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking? Yes, we have a draft of an application packet for nonprofits.
okay,
And as Sue alluded to earlier, we've got a few policies that we need to adopt before we can release that, but we're going to get started on that later this month.
okay.
The last thing I want to mention is you've already done a good job of this tonight, but if there's any visioning topics that you want to make sure that we discuss, as of right now, we've got the farmers market, food trucks. I've spoken with Councilmember Austin about land conservation possibilities. So if there's any other topics you want to make sure we include, please get those to me as soon as you can. And again, kind of for the new folks, this typically takes place at the end of January. And it was about a day and a half to 2 full days worth of time. This year, we're spreading it out over several different days, really, with 1 day dedicated to visioning. So beginning in February, you'll start to see presentations from the agencies that in prior years we would bring to the visioning session and take up several hours worth of time. We're going to spread those out over a series of just regular council meetings and give them special presentation time so that when we get together on the 14th, it'll truly be council's agenda to discuss and review whatever it is that we need to go over at that point. That's all I have for updates.
Just another quick question,
Mhm.
and I know that is your website kind of settled down and so forth? Is that, what about this, is that, the only reason I remember this, a lady asked me the other day, the software to where they can go in and click on my parcel and see that I've applied,
Mike, can you give an update on that?
is that, well, one of them is tell the other 3 council members what that is.
So that's the Smart Gov permitting system, which would basically be our own permit portal for people to apply for permits, including, I believe, GIS integration. It's one way we would be allowed to also accept credit card payments for permits, which right now we only do cash or check. There's a lot of legwork at the front end, lots of Excel spreadsheets, basically documenting every step of every single permit we issue. I think we counted 45 different of them. And then it's also going to be used for code enforcement. So you got like 20 of those. It's just a lot of staff time and we're working through it.
But the general public,
Yes, it'll have a portal, a public portal that anyone can log in and look at. They can search by address, search by name. They can just click around and it'll show if there's a permit that's been issued for something, if there's a code enforcement case. And that's part of what Mike's working on right now.
Can I ask one quick question about the updating of audio visual?
Sure.
Have you got any word back on that?
Yes, we have 2 quotes now. I reached out for a third, couldn't get it. So as far as bidding procedures go, we've met our requirements legal requirements to get that done. So one of the things that I hope to bring back to you is your next meeting on the policy, some of the policies that Stu mentioned, so we can get going on that work. For the benefit of the rest of the council, in April of 2020, when the pandemic really settled in and we were all locked down, we bought this little webcam right here and started streaming our meetings, which has worked fairly well, but as you can see from this setup right here, it could be better. So we have reached out to a couple different groups to install permanent cameras on the back of the room that will focus on the council members and have a little bit better sound integration, so we won't have to lug around a computer and all that kind of good stuff. So that's something we've heard a lot of, even with people being back in meetings in person. We've gotten a lot more engagement from the community by broadcasting online, so we want to continue to offer that service, but just in a way that is more digestible and consumable for the general public.
Is that all? Any council comments at this point? No. We'll need a motion to move into closed session. I think Randy's got that covered.
Yeah, by the way, I left that for you.
No, did you? Thank you.
Sorry.
So I'll make a motion that we're in a closed session do I have to say for the council to consider property acquisition?
Randy and Roger, all in favor? Okay, we probably